So, life is good, Russ. It's a beautiful day. Another good music listening week. What do you think?
Well, Mike, this was kind of like a summer preview for us here. It was 32 degrees centigrade. That's what, 86, 87?
Yeah, it was dry unusually.
And dry as a bone.
Which is unusual.
Yeah, very unusual for Western Japan. So it was actually kind of enjoyable. It was getting the shade, and it was not too bad. You know, we don't have many more days like this before we get the rainy season, which will be a month of cooler but very spongy weather.
Well, I wouldn't even say cooler weather. It kind of gets humid.
Yeah.
And it's not cool at all. It's just kind of this hot, weird air. And it's just sweat and feel terrible all the time.
Some mornings you can go outside and it'll be, 27 or 28 degrees centigrade and 96 or 97% humidity.
Yeah, it's just horrible. Anyway.
You'll stick to any surface that you touch. It's horrible. That's what we got to look forward to. That will be good music listening.
That'll be good music listening weather, that's for sure. Yeah. And we got a lot of good music coming up, including today. I mean, I'm looking at my list, too. It's growing. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Yep. Or at least stuff that I want to hear. I don't know if it's going to be good yet, but it looks like it's going to, really be good.
Well, a lot of stuff comes out in May, I think.
Yeah. May and October seem to be the two big months, May and October. Yeah.
May 20th, May 27th, there was a huge list of jazz releases. And so I won't be able to, get to all of them anytime soon. But maybe during that rainy season, we can sort out a number of things to get on the show here.
Right. I want to say something, by the way, about jazz. You were sort of talking about this, too. In the U.S., we keep hearing about the same few artists, really, again and again in the jazz press. And yet, there are just loads of jazz recordings coming out, like from all over the world, including the U.S., that we don't really hear about. And I think it's got to be the mission of this podcast to make people aware of those as well as what's being pushed by the media, let's say.
That's what I've
the mainstream
tried to
media.
Do. Yeah, I mean, I could pick up some bigger names, but anyone who's interested in the music is going to see these same names on all the sites and recommendations. And people are already aware of those names, but there's so much good stuff.
Well, people who listen to jazz are. I mean, other people aren't, yeah. But then again, people who don't listen to jazz aren't going to read the jazz press either. So it's sort of
there's a whole list of great stuff that comes out every week that will never get recognized anywhere, written up. Certainly not in the U.S. because it's foreign jazz, but even U.S. jazz, a whole level of top shelf players just who don't get the press, and so I like to focus on those players. Of course, there are a lot of the big name players who I enjoy myself too, but every week I want to include at least something in there that probably no one else would have noticed unless they were digging through things like I do to find it. And that's the kind of one of the big enjoyments for me in doing the research that we do to get things for the show.
Yeah, I feel like in classical music, if you remember, I remember when I was in college in the 1980s, a lot of minor labels started sort of signing all these sort of like alternative bands, punk bands and stuff like that. And you'd be listening to the cooler bands were always on these smaller, obscure labels because the major labels just didn't get it, And that's sort of, there's something like that happening. Well, not happening, but has been like that in classical music for a while. There are a lot of smaller labels that have some pretty great artists on them that put out some really fantastic recordings. And the big labels are kind of up there with them, I think. It's just this kind of level playing field, I feel like, except that the bigger labels, of course, have more promotion. But the music is kind of uniformly good throughout. It's pretty amazing. So I've really been enjoying myself over the last, say 10, 15 years. Well, really 20 years, but But it just keeps going. It's really great. There's a lot of really interesting new stuff coming out too, and researchers keep researching, so new things are coming out.
Yeah, well, that's how this whole idea for the podcast got started. Right. All of our listeners, if you don't know by now, you're listening to Adult Music, the podcast with music for the mature mind. This is episode 65, and this is Russ here and Mike over there, and we've been swapping musical recordings and ideas for more than 20 years now. Back when we used to just hand off CDs to each other and say, hey, check this out, check that out. Lots of classical
Right, and we worked
jazz
on different days. We had to leave them in each other's mailbox and stuff like that,
But now,
it's fun.
Through the wonders of this internet technology, we can listen to almost everything through streaming, and we can talk to each other online and share everything with listeners around the world. So I hope that there's people out there who are interested in hearing this music that's maybe not easy to find, and then even if they don't have time to listen to our whole podcast, they check our list every week and the playlist and the things there. And we can help spread some of these artists in all different genres who deserve to be heard. So regarding that, we're going to talk about 6 recordings tonight, like we do every week. And for any new listeners or old listeners, just to let you know, there's links for everything to Spotify and Apple in the episode description. And also at the top of the description, there's a link with all of the recordings in one single playlist that's on our preferred streaming network, Deezer, or platform that is. You can also check out the podcast there. Look us up, username Adult Music Podcast. You can get the podcasts and the playlist. Now, if you don't see the full description or the links are not active on whatever app or platform you listen to us on, just come over to our host site, Podbean, Podbean, and you can listen to the podcast there as well, but all the links and information is easy to find. Now, if you enjoy the podcast, please follow, subscribe, whatever app or platform you prefer to listen to us on. If you take a moment, give us a ranking, write a review. That helps us get listed in the browsing category recommendations. We've been up there the past few weeks in Apple and Podbean, so I think we've gotten some new listeners there. And we're on a few more platforms, as we mentioned in the previous weeks, Samsung and iHeartRadio. So hopefully we've got a few new listeners through there. Also, can check us out on Facebook. We've got a page there. We're uploading more videos and additional content there, somewhat humorous or additional things. So check that out.
I haven't been posting my stuff enough. I got to get going with the classical end of that.
I'll refer to one when we get to it tonight. There's an amazing...
we need a website. We have to get a website soon because we're growing. We're about ready for one.
Yeah. Anyway, check out those extras on Facebook and leave a comment if you like. And if you want to get in touch with us directly, any questions or comments, we'd be happy to hear from you and reply. Our email address is adultmusicpodcast, all one word, @gmail.com.
Yeah, and do please write to we're gaining listeners, but we're not really gaining messages. We'd like to hear from the listeners and see what you think and what you want to hear. If you want us to do anything, if you want us to change anything, if you think I should be thrown off the podcast, you can let us know. But I'm not going anywhere, so there you go.
We get a lot of requests from promotion agencies. Please listen to this and please review that. But it would be nice to hear more from listeners. So
those are interesting. They tell us listeners what you want to hear. The promotion agencies are they're trying to promote their music, and it's usually not so interesting. It's like they don't. It's not that it's not interesting. It's not what we do. Basically, they're not really kind of sending us music that we would cover on the podcast, let's say.
I have to say that the flowery descriptions they write about some of this music is quite amusing.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. They need to get their stuff out there, but
of course.
It's not really what we're listening to on the podcast. They're just kind of just sending it without listening, I guess. They probably just send it out to everybody.
Yeah. At least they write to us. Anyway.
Yeah, just as long as they they don't send us a new album, Kenny G with a tabla player. That would be the...
Yeah.
He's actually done an album like that.
Maybe he'll make a Kwanzaa album this week.
This year? You think Kenny G?
I don't know.
That'd be horrible.
Seems like he'll do anything to sell records. But
oh, man.
Anyway, speaking of Kenny G, once when I met Nick Brignola, the great baritone sax player who was from Troy, New York, used to see him all the time when I was back upstate, where I'm from. And once when I went to his concert, he picked up his soprano sax, and some kid in the audience said, Kenny G, Kenny G. And he said, yeah, you're right, kid. Kenny G owns one of these. He says, but I play it.
What was it? The old there was a podcast. There was a jazz podcast that did a whole. Who was it? It was Nate Chinen was on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did a
Jazz
whole
United,
episode
Yeah.
on how they didn't like Kenny G. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
Anyway,
we're going to have a lot of sax tonight, but we've got some other interesting stuff to go through first.
Yeah, well, we'll do the classical first. We generally go in the order that the works were written, more or less. So jazz generally is the 20th and 21st century. We're doing all new recordings, so a lot of those recordings are brand new, and those compositions as well. But going back into the past here, I just gave this whole talk about how there are these new labels and they're discovering all these new composers, and going with that, our first album tonight is going to be Mozart.
Yeah, of
a
course.
composer everybody knows.
Right.
And in fact, this week and next week too, because I've got two piano concerto albums that I wanted to talk about. This week we're doing Piano Concertos Volume 6 by Jean-Efflam Bavouzet, and this is a pianist that both of us really like a lot.
The Golden
since we
Touch.
heard his. Yeah, the Golden Touch, and he did this fantastic Prokofiev Piano Concertos record back in 2013, 14. I think it was 2013, which I left in your box, as you said at the beginning when we were doing that. And that changed our perception of what the Prokofiev Piano Concertos would sound like, because we were used to the Ashkenazi recordings. Yeah,
there's a completely different atmosphere on that.
Yeah, I still highly recommend it. I still have those in my my iPod Touch. Yes, I have an iPod Touch, even though they don't make them anymore.
He, of course, he's great on French works, of course, but that sort of light and amazing touch that he has seems to work on everything. I've enjoyed his Haydn recordings a lot, and these Mozart ones are great as well. It's light, but impactful when it needs to be, and it just seems to bring a lot of energy and class to anything that he records, and this was no exception.
Yeah, so let's go through this. Volume 6. Now, the thing is, I was kind of holding off doing this because, it's the 6th volume. He's going to record all the piano concertos. But Leaf of Ansness just put out his Mozart Momentum 1786 album this year, and we're going to talk about that next week. But he records one of the same piano concertos. I think it's number 23. Yeah, and I kind of wanted to listen to them both, so I thought we'd do this one too, because we both like this pianist a lot, and he's now in this project. He's also doing a set of Haydn piano sonatas recordings that he's up to volume 10 of that, and they're all pretty spectacular too. All right, so anyway, on this one he is accompanied by the Manchester Camerata, conducted by, oh man, I hope I say this right, Gábor Takács-Nagy. Okay.
Oh yeah.
I actually am imitating the way someone else said it. I didn't actually try to look it up.
Naj?
I think it's pronounced Naj.
Looks like Nagy, but
it looks like Nagy. But I heard somebody said Naj, so I'm going with that. Takács, I remember from the Takács Quartet, T-A-K-A with an accent, C-S. Okay, and this is on the Chandos label. All right, so anyway, this starts off. Now, part of the appeal of this is is having a conductor, I think. I think this is a weakness of the Ansness recordings, but we'll get to that next week. Let's just talk about this one. You have a conductor that's sort of thinking about the tempo and the flexibility of the phrases, and he can concentrate on that while the pianist just focuses on the piano. A lot of pianists like to do it the way Mozart did it, and you're conducting from the piano. And there's not much conducting that really needs to be done in Mozart, to be honest, because modern orchestras can play this in their sleep now, because they play it all through school and things like that. So the style is really embedded in their education, in their minds, this whole style. Anyway, the disc opens with the overture to Der Schauspieldirektor in C major, K486, written in 1786. Okay, this is the orchestra only, so Bavouzet is not on this. So it's sort of an intro to the piano concertos, and we get an idea of what we're going to hear from the orchestra, which is nice. It's a nice, clear, beautiful sound on the opening timpani hits. They impact well. I had my subwoofer on, and it felt really good. The quiet string parts that follow come out really clearly, too. This is a quietly recorded album and needs a boost from the volume knob, so you won't want to give that a boost. Lovely shaping of the phrases by Takács-Nagy. He's a bit restrained in energy in this, not pushing the rushing lines. I like this kind of performance, clear and refined, but I prefer more energy, really. Okay, but I have no problem with this. Everything is balanced, and there's nothing to complain about. I'm really enjoying the clarity of the recording, and the work is engaging, of course. Mozart, all of Mozart's music is. And it's also fairly brief. It's only about 4 minutes long. Okay, we get into Piano Concerto number 22 in E-flat major, K482 of 1785. This one also appeared on last year's Hans Ness album. And in this particular one, we have the cadenzas by Bavouzet himself, written after cadenzas by Johann Nepomuk Hummel, who was a student of Mozart and Beethoven's, and he was like a big star at the time, touted by Beethoven to become one of the big composers of his day, and he was. And then he was forgotten after he died. But his music is very good. Okay, so he's worth investigating. It's a lot of his music's being recorded now, which is great. Okay, so we have here the first movement, Allegro. Same lovely sound quality in this, and I love the quality with which the wind instruments came out in the quieter passages after the opening timpani. We have the same kind of opening with the timpani as we did in the overture in this piano concerto, and they register well. The transition to the second slower theme is well taken. Tension builds to the cadence are well taken. We really feel that building up. They're not built up as much as they can be. Again, this is a bit of a restrained performance. It's more elegant than exciting. All right, so think about that. Bavouzet's entry at the 2 minute and 18-second mark, I actually caught this one. Usually when I give you these times, they're approximate because I look back and say, oh, that was great, and it's already gone. I don't rewind. But this one actually happens at 2 minutes, 18 seconds. It's quiet and in line with the pianos of the day. Even though he's using a full-size modern piano, he's got this very light touch, very appealing. The recording is fairly dry, with enough room sound to allow it to breathe, and this allows us to hear detail in Bavouzet's piano playing. It's recorded at a bit of a distance, given the lightness of attack. It could have been closer, but he fits into the overall sound picture really well. Everything here is well judged. There's a turn to a darker key at 3 minutes and 46 seconds or so, and it registers via an accent by the orchestra. I really like when conductors do that. They alert you to a change by some kind of thing they do. I like Bavouzet's sudden slowing to introduce the last phrase before the exposition ending cadence around the 4 minute and 30-second mark. The cadence actually comes at 5 minutes and 15 seconds and continues on from there into additional material that leads to a more solid cadence at 5 minutes and 49 seconds. And still, the orchestra won't let it go. A lot of harmonic smoke and mirrors here. It must have delighted or infuriated audiences of the day, whatever their temperament was. And the point I want to make here is that in this particular performance, you notice these cadences that release a little tension, or these avoided cadences, they really come out. And that happens because of the phrasing, because of the timing, because of the tempo, a lot of things.
Yeah.
So that's really fantastic. You're getting a sense of the shape of the work. All right. And that's always welcome.
I like here that in the first movement, especially, the tempo is not too fast.
Mm-hmm.
And it allows for a lot of these extra emphasis on other elements because It just seems a bit more relaxed for an allegro, but there's time for those fast things later. But here, the slightly restrained tempo allows for other extra expression in other areas, like you mentioned.
There's always a reason for this choice, and I think here they want the detail to register. So when you go for a slower tempo, you're going to get a lot more detail and a lot more. You could kind of squeeze out the emotion, a little bit more, like it's an orange and you're squeezing out that juice. You can kind of work hard on that. Anyway, the orchestra gets their own cadences at 6 minutes and 14 seconds and 6 minutes and 23 seconds. Then we go to the development section. The piano goes into some odd key areas for the time, that is, during the development, before emerging into something sunny and major at around the 7 minute and 20 second mark. And then at 7 minutes and 48 seconds, we're back to the opening timpani hits, and the recapitulation of the opening material starts. The orchestra and conductor by this point have gained some confidence, and the bridge into the second theme is pretty exciting. Not the same as it was in the beginning. It leans into the forward movement a bit of the work a bit. The second theme is now played in the tonic key. It's lovely, and you can hear that at 9 minutes and 20 seconds. Full of classical era charm, taken idiomatically here. Bavouzet's cadenza starts at around the 10 minute and 50 second mark. It starts with a long scalar run, then after the 11th minute goes into melodic material, played with a bit of romantic era retards slowing down. It's fairly ornate for a classical cadenza, probably Hummel's contribution. He was in Beethoven's era. There's good virtuosity in it, though. It's a pretty busy cadenza, not much room left for a pause, and it ends with a crash into the closing material. And the orchestra has gained momentum at this point, so they sound really exciting at the end. Okay, we get into the second movement of this three-movement work. Most concerti have three movements. This is the slow movement, andante, and it starts solemnly in the strings with a forlorn theme broken into short phrases. Again, harmonic games are played before the piano comes in at 1 minute and 35 seconds. There are a lot of teasing approaches to a cadence that are then backed away from until we finally hear the end of the opening theme before the piano comes in. Here the piano has a lot of space and plays quietly with lovely phrasing from Bavouzet. What do we expect? He's always really good at this. He's one of my favorite pianists currently out there. One of our favorite pianists, I would say. Yeah. The orchestra plays some new material, morphing it into something with a little cheer in it. I like the repeating bassoon note at around the 3 minutes and 45 second note. The bassoon note at the 3 minute and 45 second mark in the background as the winds play the melody. Piano is back and more active at 4 minutes and 10 seconds. Bavouzet is taking a slightly faster tempo here, and it's a good move. It gives the piece a sense of urgency to get somewhere. The orchestra comes back with more material at 5 minutes and 30 seconds, mostly winds again, and the tempo is fairly fast, so we're not getting a lot of emotion wrung out here. This is a funny thing. When you're playing a slow movement and it's a little fast, it's sort of like the emotion is being hidden a little bit. That often happens. Notice that when you listen. It's pretty interesting. It's got more of a light glow of gorgeous melody to it. At 6 minutes and 18 seconds, something more dramatic at higher volume comes out of the orchestra, but the piano responds quietly and resignedly, bringing the line to a climax. So no drama for this pianist. He's had enough for this, not the pianist, the piano line. The orchestra continues with its dramatic statements and climaxes the material at 7 minutes and 10 seconds. We continue with the piano playing quietly in response. At 8 minutes and 14 seconds, the orchestra quietens down. It's almost as though the piano is saying, no more drama. There's some shorter phrases ending in a cadence, and the honking bassoon bass line after 8 minutes and 30 seconds is ear-catching. All right. Third movement. Allegro. And other things. There's also a cadenza in this one, also by Bavouzet after Hummel. This movement has a dancing pastoral rondo theme. Pastoral means it sounds like a country dance, so it's very square and it's melodic lines and things like that. It's predictable. It's introduced at a perfectly judged tempo, and volume by the piano, it grows boisterous on its orchestral repeat. Again, we get some cadential teases and delightful phrasing details drawn out by the orchestra. And we get our first departure from the theme at 1 minute and 25 seconds. Remember, a rondo, you go away from the theme and you come back. I think Robert Greenberg explained it as hearing the rondo theme is like being at home. Then you go to the store and you go back home. That's what a rondo's like. It's like little... It's quiet and features hesitant lines from the piano, which develop into long scalar figures featuring brilliant sparkle from Bavouzet. Another tease, we expect to hear the rondo theme after the cadence at 2 minutes and 28 seconds, but instead we get a new, more active section than the previous. That Mozart is always, he's always teasing us in his music. The orchestra and Bavouzet are good at making these surprises register, or making the material register as a surprise, because after all, we know what's coming since we've heard these works so many times. Mozart's music is really well known. The rondo theme comes back at 3 minutes and 32 seconds. At 4 minutes and 48 seconds, we get a serenade-type theme from the orchestra, which the piano follows by repeating it in its own way, at once austere, then with some embellishments. The melody melts in the evening air. The piano starts a pacing line after 6 minutes and 30 seconds, gets a cadenza-like approach to the rondo theme at 7 minutes and 10 seconds, which he reaches the cadenza after the 7 minute and 20 second mark. The piano gets a lot of impressive scale work in this section. Bavouzet via Hummel. The cadenza comes at 9 minutes and 15 seconds. Bavouzet via Hummel uses the rondo theme to launch into various variations on the material in different keys. And Bavouzet is absolutely charming in this last movement. He comes out of the cadenza at around 10 minutes and 40 seconds, playing the rondo theme one more time before we get to what we think is the final cadence, which we hit, and the piano extends the movement a bit with the last quiet statement, and then the orchestra plays the final cadence. So, nice performance, full of surprises, and the orchestra and the pianist make those register. This is a really great performance of this work.
Yeah, I was impressed by his control and dynamics, varying the dynamics throughout the performance. And so effortlessly. Everything is so fluid and light when he plays. It's amazing. And like you say, even though we've heard these works before, they're very good at making these things surprising. And I really like the false ending. At the end here, you think, oh, that's it. And no, it's not. And then you get that final big orchestral finish there. So, just completely enjoyable. And you feel like you're hearing it for the first time in this performance. Yeah,
all of Mozart's piano concertos, he wrote 27 of them, or actually less, but some of them are attributed to Mozart, I think. But they're all different. And this particular one, you got to wonder what the circumstances were for its first performance, because there are a lot of teasing parts in it. He's really maybe teasing the pianist in the audience or things like that. It's rather fun. Some of them are very serious, but not that one. This one, the next one, and the last one on this album is Piano Concerto number 23 in A major, K 488. Okay, and this cadenza is by Mozart himself. All right, the first movement has an amiable theme from the orchestra. And they start this one with more excitement than they did the previous one. The previous one sort of gained in confidence and excitement as it went. It started a bit sort of decorous and, sort of, leisurely. But this one starts out really less restrained than before. Still decorous, though. It has the right tempo and a bit of a forward kind of lean to it, so it feels like it really wants to get somewhere. The piano's entry is at the 2 minute mark and is beautifully taken at a genteel volume by Bavouzet. We've come to expect no less from him after hearing the 5 previous discs in this series. I've heard them all. He slows down the second theme a bit at 3 minutes and giving it a bit of a severe marching quality, which the orchestra then softens the contours of. I like the tempo this movement is traveling at. It's rather brisk and engaging for that reason. The development section features a lot of impressive scale work from the piano, and we get back to the recapitulation, after the 6th minute. The recapitulation is when the opening material repeats in a sonata movement. Interestingly, when the piano gets the second theme here in the tonic key, he softens its contours from the more march-like edges he gave it the first time we heard it in the exposition. So he's actually kind of changed his approach to even playing it, which is I found really fascinating. A lot of variety here. The cadenza comes at the 9-minute mark about, and this is a familiar one, right in keeping with the tone of the movement. It's familiar because every other recording I've heard of this, because there's a cadenza by Mozart in existence for this work, everybody uses it. And Bavouzet stretches certain phrases interestingly by providing brief retards and hesitations, and giving certain bass notes extra weight. He hands off to the orchestra at the 10-minute and 17-second mark, and they bring the movement to an amiable ending with a quiet, unaccented cadence at the end. The Adagio movement, movement 2. By the way, before I go into this, someone wrote to me this week and was asking about he had heard the Mahler Adagio from Symphony 5, very famous, very beautiful work, and he wanted to know if I could recommend any other adagios to him. It's kind of a funny question.
Yeah.
There are works like that have that kind of glimmer, that string glimmer that Mahler gives there, but Adagio, it's not really a form, it's a speed.
Yeah.
So of course this Adagio sounds nothing like the Mahler. It just means that's slow, okay? Anyway, I did recommend some, Bruckner, other Mahler, and some of the late Beethoven string quartets to him, so we'll see if he's listening to those next time I talk to him. Okay, anyway. For this Adagio, Bavouzet plays the theme solo at the beginning. His shaping of it is interesting. He's giving weight to the downbeat, as you should, but he sort of makes the theme sound a little crooked in doing so. The orchestra comes in and gives a lot of slowly arpeggiated string atmosphere, with strings playing the theme over the rolling accompaniment. The piano's music is slow and thoughtful, and Bavouzet phrases deliberately as if trying to communicate a mind pondering something. So he's kind of wandering through the woods trying to work out this issue that he has. So I'm getting that feeling from his piano playing here. I like the winds at around 2 minutes and 36 seconds. Great recorded sound. The quality of their tones comes out. There's a nice false cadence at around the 4 minute and 20 second mark. And afterwards, Bavouzet phrases with some interesting and engaging accents. There's a lot of melancholy and darkness in a wandering, lost in the woods at night kind of way in this movement. And the piece is brought to a quiet, full close at the end. Then we get the third movement, Allegro assai, an active theme that will turn out to be a rondo, instantly memorable, perfect for a rondo. This is not a pastoral rondo. It's pretty much a musical figure, very catchy and very excitable. Not quite a melody, it's more of a figure. It's got impressive quick bassoon lines in the first minute. I really enjoyed that, and they were well caught here. I always notice the bassoon, when the bassoon gets a solo like that, they're hard to do, and a lot of these are used for, these passages are used for bassoon auditions. For orchestral
excerpts, yeah.
Yeah. The famous one is from Beethoven's Fourth Symphony, the fourth movement. There's a big solo for the bassoon in that, and they often make bassoon players play that when they're auditioning. All right, we get the theme back at 2 minutes 48 seconds. It's a rondo, and we're off to the more upbeat second departure from the theme after this. At this point, the piano and the ensemble are playing off each other exceptionally well at high speed. It feels secure and enjoyable. There's a really intriguing darkening of key to the minor at 4 minutes and 30 seconds or so. Very sudden, unexpected, like a cloud is covering our sunny day. And then I could swear that the theme at 5 minutes and 50 seconds is going to launch into Dixie. Dun 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 dun. Yeah, but it doesn't continue in that melody. It always reminds me of Dixie when I hear that. Listen at 5 minutes and 50 seconds into the third movement of this is Piano Concerto number 23 in this recording. The way it's played here, actually, I've already heard the Ansness recording too, and it just always reminds me of that. At 6 minutes and 12 seconds, we get the last statement of the rondo theme. Excellent build up to the final cadence, leaving us feeling exhilarated when it arrives. So these are refined performances with a bit of amusing detail drawn out. I thought as a whole that Concerto 24 came across more charmingly than 23, but they both have enormous charms. We're big fans of Bavouzet, as I've said, and he comes across in sparkling form here. This album is just over an hour long, and that hour went by fast. I actually listened to this after work one day, and I was like, oh, God, so it's going to end. I'm tired. But, man, I couldn't understand how the time went by so fast. This was such a good recording. The playing is engaging. The recorded sound warm and comforting. Beautiful. Yet another engaging release in this series. I say, collect them all.
Yeah, really good. I described the piano in this second Concerto 23 as like bubbling. It sort of just seems to be, the notes are floating out from Bavouzet on the keyboard, just like popping out with all this exuberance. Lots of nice momentum. Everything sounds precise. Never sounds tired, which can happen with these works that have been gone through so many times. It sounds fresh.
It's always amazing to me. You get these works these warhorse works that can come out sounding fresh. A lot of young players are able to put that kind of enthusiasm and sort of new insight into them.
Here, it's a great recording too, as we usually get from Chandos. The orchestra and piano are perfectly balanced. Everything sounds just right. Nothing distracting in the sonics. Enthusiastic performances. Excellent sound overall. And Bavouzet is a name, deserves all that recognition because he's really amazing. I've never heard anything that disappointed me from him.
Right, me neither. I tend to collect his recordings as they come out, no matter what he's playing.
I haven't heard one that wasn't impressive yet, and he does, his signature is that lightness of touch and fleetness, but that's applicable across, various eras and types of playing, and it really works well on Mozart. The speed and, as I said, the dynamic variety he gets and the subtlety of accents just comes across really impressive on these Mozart works. So highly recommended for any fans of Mozart or piano in general.
Yeah, classical piano fans, keep that name in mind. Jean-Efflam Bavouzet. Write it down. Do a search on your, put them into your search engine for your streaming service, and guarantee you won't be disappointed.
Yeah, whatever he does. When he plays Ravel, when he plays Haydn, Mozart, Prokofiev.
Yeah, he recently recorded also the complete Beethoven sonatas too, and those were really interesting too.
The Beethovens are good too, yeah.
Because he gave them sort of a quieter sort of more austere kind of feel than you usually get. Like he kind of took the romantic feel away from them a bit.
Yeah.
And it was really intriguing. He kind of sort of reinvented those too. I enjoyed listening to those as well.
Yeah. He's, a giant of classical piano, deservedly so.
Contemporary classical piano, let's say. Yeah, he's one of the best out there. All right, onwards to another recording on the Chandos label, Metamorphosen by the Sinfonia of London, conducted by John Wilson. Now, we talked about this ensemble just a few episodes ago. What was it? It was...
what was
that? I can't remember. Anyway.
This is an all-string thing here.
This one's all strings, though, yeah. Oh, man, I can't... So I'm just blanking out on the old episodes now. This happened to be earlier this week. Yeah, because we were talking about the Joel Ross recording that we talked about a few weeks ago. Somebody asked me, have you ever heard of Joel Ross? And I'm like, no, I don't think I've ever heard of him. And yet we talked about him 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. I guess it wasn't memorable.
I guess not. And I do remember the jazz that I really like, but the classical I tend to remember. Just off the top of my head, but
let me see here.
I think this one erased the memory of that one. I guess I don't know. So I'm still thinking of the old Respighi one, which was really great. But it was Ravel. It was Ravel, wasn't it? No, was it? Yeah, it was Mamelwa. Yeah, okay, I remember now. It was all Ravel.
It was Ravel.
La Valse, yeah, Mamelwa. Those performances.
Oh yeah, Maurice Ravel orchestral works. Yeah,
right. Okay, well here this is a very different sort of program.
Thing, yeah.
All Viennese works from the 20th century. And they're all Viennese works that look back towards an earlier time. Two of them, the ones by Richard Strauss, his Metamorphosen, which is what the album is named after, and Erich Wolfgang Korngold's work on this album, the Symphonic Serenade, both look back to pre-war Europe. These were both written just after the war ended. And Korngold had gone to the United States and was working in Hollywood during the war, whereas Strauss stayed in Germany during the Nazi period. And I guess he still composed while all this stuff was going on. But once the war was over, they looked back and remembered the world they once lived in that was now gone. And we're seeing a little bit of that now. People our age have already experienced this because we grew up in a world, remember, without the internet. Without and especially smartphones. And now it's not just that these things are around, but they've taken over our lives. We just don't live and can't live the same way that we lived before. And when I hear works like these, I mean, the war had just destroyed a culture, basically. Obviously it was sad for the people who had lived in the culture before the war started, who were... who weren't being, pushed down by it, let's say. But Vienna had this great musical culture, and now it was just in complete ruins. So these two composers are looking back to that here, and I relate more just because of the way we live today. I mean, we've already seen a world we grew up in disappear, apparently for good. I think they never come back.
When I was listening to this one, since it's all strings, which for me usually is a turnoff because I like the full palette of the orchestra.
Me too.
And being a brass player, I like to hear that. I'm always waiting for the brass and things. So when I get all strings,
well,
I'm
you love
thinking,
20th century works. Then.
Yeah,
Sure.
But so the one that struck me here the most, I think, was the Schrecker actually.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's the earliest one.
Even I'm not that familiar with his music, but what I thought is he got the largest sort of palette of different tones out of the orchestra.
Oh, I see
emphasizing
what you mean,
the low bass, more kind of pizzicato things moving against other types of more legato phrases, so that I got a larger palette of sounds. The last time we did all strings, I think, was when we heard the Vaughan Williams.
That's the fantasy on the theme of Thomas Tallis. He's talking. That's a great piece. I really love that.
It's a great piece, which I felt completely satisfied with only strings in the way that moves. And so I liked all of these, but the Schrecker sort of impressed me with the versatility of the arrangements, utilizing different techniques of strings and sounds that gave it a bigger breadth of expression, I thought.
Yeah, let's go through these. The Richard Strauss work opens the program. I should mention, by the way, this is an SACD. If you have the equipment to play it, you can hear it in all its smooth, creamy glory, all those string sounds. Richard Strauss, Metamorphosen. This was written in 1945, just as the war ended, and Germany was in ruins. Okay, now we think of that good, the Nazis were beaten, but he's also thinking about the culture, because that's the world he lived in. He wasn't he wasn't really involved in Nazi politics. Anyway, this is for 23 solo strings. It's a big orchestra. And he wrote this as sort of a lament for, I think it was the destruction of, I might be thinking of Kurt Vonnegut, though, Dresden or things like that. But I don't know, these beautiful Baroque cities that were just bombed to smithereens in the war, and now just wouldn't be there anymore. This is it's a work of mourning, M-O-U-R. It's like you're mourning someone's death or the death of a culture here. The first motif. Now, if you want to follow this, it's a 30-minute work and it's through composed. There are no. Yeah, there are sections in it, but there are no indications as to when they occur. If you really want to look up the themes and go into this in detail, in Wikipedia actually does a pretty good description of it. I just kind of took a look at that, but I didn't just when we listen to these, we're really just listening to them. I'm not really sort of explaining what's happening in them. Maybe we should do some videos on YouTube about that, but we'll see. That'll take time, though. Boy, a lot of research, a lot of graphics. Ugh. Okay, so right away, the first motif we hear is grief-stricken, and there's a tritone in it. So that's always a bad side in classical music, although it was used a lot in the 20th century. But the direction is upwards, and the initial 5 cellos and double bass invite the other players by making the space. There's a call and response approach among the instruments, and this work yearns for a past unencumbered by the destruction the war had brought. So basically, he wants to go back to the time he was living in his younger days when the culture was intact. Oh, don't we all? Yeah, sure. College, how I miss it. Anyway, the work alludes but never quotes works from the past. We hear like allusions to Mahler, Wagner, and it does eventually directly quote the funeral march movement from Beethoven's Third Symphony, the Eroica. So that's the beginning of the second movement. You have to have a good ear to hear it, though. I'll point out where it is. The Eroica, by the way, is in C minor, or this particular section is in C minor, a highly charged key for Beethoven. He used it in the Fifth Symphony, rather famously, for the Fate theme. Da, 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 da. Okay, but in this case, there's no solace at the end as there is in Beethoven's piece. And let's see. We get the devastated harmonies at the beginning. At a minute in, you can hear a hint of the heroic funeral march, which will be played at the end, half an hour from now. Okay. From this point, funereal, but solidly followable pacing from the ensemble. Good full sound from Chandos on this, by the way. This is a giant string section, 23 strings, and they're all playing different things. We get a sense of this stretched out musical line that the late Romantic composers like Wagner, Bruckner, and Mahler loved. The bass pizzicato at the 3-minute and 10-second mark registers loudly, especially if you have a subwoofer set up. By now, the strings have reached a higher register and sound a bit heavenly in their imploring intensity. At 3 minutes and 50 seconds, there's an implied cadence as a new theme starts in the cello. And I like this. Here we're in the 20th century. We never hear the last note of the cadence. It's sort of implied by the new theme. You know, you kind of sense it rather than hear it. I always like that technique. Mahler did it a lot too. Another long breathed section follows, which also rises to higher range and which morphs into yet another section for the cellos at 6 minutes and 40 seconds. This just goes on like this. There's a lot of detail I could talk about in this, but I think I'm going to go over this quickly. Cadences come and go very quickly. We don't linger on any cadences. We're always kind of moving on, sort of like a ghost floating over these ruins. And the music gets louder and more excitable from 11 minutes and 30 seconds. We're building towards an agitated big climax here, but we don't get it. It falls away without resolution into another quiet climbing theme that quickly builds in intensity. So we're going to always have this sort of Sisyphean rising and falling sort of feeling in this. There's a 4 single note theme like this. Dun, 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 dun. That reminds me. The notes say that it's like the third movement of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, dun 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 dun, like a march. But I hear it more as this section in Schoenberg's string sextet, Verklärte Nacht, Transfigured Night, where just before the man starts talking, where the more sunny music comes in, where you hear this the strings go like and I kind of hear that as a reference to Transfigured Night, which to me would make sense because that's what he's looking for in this piece. He's looking to transfigure the Vienna that of the time into the past before the war. So I think that's what that is, except that he doesn't get it, sadly. We have the biggest musical tension built at the 15th minute, with the music at its loudest and most dense yet. It reaches a quickly taken climax, falls away into a busier theme that again starts to build upward. The usual waning of intensity into something forlorn occurs, and by 20 minutes, we're mourning quietly. There's a surprising pause at the 20-minute and 21-second mark. Then a Schoenberg-like outburst, complete with the that single note theme, dun 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 dun, around the ensemble. And so this is, when I say Schoenberg, I mean his more chromatic era when he sounded more romantic. This is before his 12-tone music. The falling notes at 22 minutes, 40 seconds are reminiscent of the beginning of that work too. And by the 26th minute, we're still hearing those textures, which suddenly fall away into a quieter, leaner texture and reach a quiet cadence. The Beethoven funeral march theme from the opening of the second movement of his Eroica Symphony can be heard starting at 26 minutes and 42 seconds in the bass, just before the cadence is reached. But it's kind of buried. It's not very obvious because it's under these other higher harmonies. It's clearly audible, though, if you're listening to it. In the score, at this point, Strauss wrote the words "in memoriam," and the piece ends sadly there. Nice performance. I want to say about the performance, it's paced a little more quickly than the older recordings I know from Karajan back in the day when I first heard these recordings. They used to really stretch out the melodies and really draw the emotion out. That's not the case with today's generation of conductors. They're more interested in the musical line, and I think they shy away from this kind of heavy emotion a little bit. I wonder if it's a generational thing. But anyway, everything is very clearly taken. It's a beautiful recording and a nice performance. I think the older generation were better in this work. That's just all I'll say. Although this is an excellent performance. Next, we get the Franz Schrecker piece that Russ was just talking about, an intermezzo, and it sounds like that. It was later incorporated into Schrecker's Romantische Suite 3 years later, and it looks back to Brahms in the matter of Schoenberg's Transfigured Night again. Okay, so that Schoenberg word keeps coming up. It has shimmering passages and increasingly elastic harmonies. And this is pretty clever programming, I want to say, on John Wilson's part, because this really does act as an intermezzo, and it separates the two big works on this album. It starts with shimmering high strings played in harmony in a gliding 3/4 rhythm. Could be 6/8, I don't know. It's very pretty and lightens the mood from the previous piece, so it's kind of nice to hear here as well. The Strauss is very heavy. John Wilson provides the much-needed light touch to put this across. The strings have an appealing glimmer to them in this piece. The opening melody is then repeated at a softer volume, richly orchestrated, and we're off to something new and more active at 1 minute and 48 seconds. I like the dancing rhythm at the 3-minute mark. The music quietens, and we get those opening, glimmering strings again just past the 4-minute mark. The piece is light and enjoyable and well-programmed here. It lifts the weight that Strauss's work imposed on us. And as Russ said, it's got some pretty interesting orchestration featuring
great
strings.
Arrangement of the strings. And what I liked about this, too, is it has a kind of breathing, like a breath-like pulse to the movement that goes through. So it's sort of, how can I say? It ebbs and flows as if it's respirating through the movement of the piece, rather than just sticking with these tempos through. So I found that pulse sort of pulling me into it in another way.
Yeah.
I don't know if you picked up on that.
I'll have to give that another listen then, I guess. All right, the last work on this is the other big work, Erich Wolfgang Korngold's Symphonic Serenade in B-flat major for string orchestra, written 1947 to 1948. And this is one of a series of works that Korngold addressed, in which Korngold addressed the traditions of his Central European, that is Viennese, past. He's looking back as well. The first movement is labeled Schwebend, which is floating, and labeled Allegro Moderato Semplice for its tempo. This is dedicated to Korngold's wife, and this movement begins with an amorous melody from 16 first violins, accompanied by a characteristically divided body of strings for him. He does this a lot. It's very opulent sounding, sort of like those Hollywood scores that he sort of pretty much invented. He that Hollywood sound in the old Errol Flynn movies. He wrote those scores and really invented the Hollywood sound. That's really him. Okay, it's his sound. It's not really like he's copying the Hollywood sound. He made the Hollywood sound. Anyway, this doesn't have all the full orchestra. It's just strings, so you're not going to have quite that. This, by the way, begins in D flat major and finds its way to the home key. And there's a lot of evading the home key in this work, which gives it a lot of tension. And one does wonder if that doesn't have anything biographical to do, where Korngold is staying away from Europe, especially during the war. He was in California at the time, escaping the Nazis. He was Jewish and got work in Hollywood, along with Schoenberg, who also lived in Vienna at the time. Schoenberg didn't write for movies, though, needless to say. This has an amiable opening driven by thumping pizzicato bass and brief repeating low string rhythm. It's like a repeating sort of rhythm. It's light and enjoyable. About the 1 minute mark, the rhythm and theme gets more aggressive, but then reverts to its floating quality again at 1 minute and 40 seconds. Back to an aggressive posture at 2 minutes or so. It's though this floating theme is being interrupted by something more sinister and insistent. So I'm thinking, I like reading into, you're not supposed to do this when you listen to music, but I can't help it. I keep thinking that the floating theme might be his memory of Vienna in his youth, and then this more sinister theme would be the war clouds coming on. That's one thing it could be. But it does have that kind of idea, like there's a dramatic conflict interrupting something. Whatever happens, we keep coming back to the opening floating theme. There's a Viennese longing to this theme, especially evident at the end of the movement, when elements of the thematic material are played quietly, leading to the soft final cadence. The intermezzo, the second movement, this was really intriguing. I like this a lot. It's lots of pizzicati in this. The entire opening theme is pizzicati, well played and shaped here by the ensemble. This sounds tough to achieve, the melodic line in this, because they're doing it with pizzicati, so you have to play it at a certain speed in order to get the sense of line. This section reaches its end at the 1 minute and 26 second mark. Then we get something of a bit more science fiction-like. It kind of sounded to me like a theremin sort of sound in the strings here, as the middle section has the violins playing on the bridges and fingerboards. This ends quickly, and about the 1 minute 50 second mark, we're back to the pizzicati of the opening. The middle section, I guess it's not a middle section, but the sci-fi section gets another look at 3 minutes and 15 seconds, and the pizzicato section closes the work. So it's A, B, A, B, A. But in the end, it's not all pizzicati. The instruments are bowed at the end. There's a real wink to this movement. It's clever and enjoyable, even a bit fascinating. If you hear only one movement of this work, make sure it's this one. It's pretty unique. Third movement, lento religioso. And this is a very sincere-sounding movement. It's in D major, like the last movement of Mahler's Third Symphony, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of that. It starts slowly and meltingly, like that Mahler Symphony movement. It moves slowly, but again, the ensemble do well to have the orchestral writing shimmer and to maintain a sense of both melodic line and the long line leading the movement to its end. There's a very Viennese glow to this. I loved the not totally realized cadence at around 3 minutes and 20 seconds, a characteristic of 20th century music. What was to be the tonic chord starts the next theme in minor after a pause. We don't get a sense of resolution. This section is solemn with gently drawn out, and I said they were tenuto notes. By that, I meant that they're not connected, but they're not staccato either. Tenuto really means that you're giving each note an accent. Maybe. There's some heavenly high strings a la Strauss. Strauss, who said that? Strauss and Wagner. Then the music gets agitated at the end of the 5th minute. When this quietens down, we get material that starts reaching upward, then a theme leading to resolution at 9 minutes and 10 seconds. It's very solemn, calm, appealing, and this eventually leads to the movement to its end. The finale is labeled Allegro con fuoco, with fire. And this is a moto perpetuo, which means it's just this rhythm that just kind of almost drives itself on like a machine. And the second theme of this movement, by the way, comes from the 1935 film Captain Blood, where it was buried. That's an Errol Flynn movie too, I think. What's going on here? What did I do here? This comes charging out of the gates with quick string figuration, punctuated with pizzicati. Nice bass presence in the recording. At 2 minutes, the entire musical profile of the work changes as the strings lighten and hand off a repeating melodic motif, which is probably the Captain Blood theme. The scurrying strings start again. Then we get a more rustic theme at 2 minutes and 57 seconds. We tend to go back and forth between the lighter and scurrying themes, and the scurrying strings dominate. The melting theme we hear at the end would be the romantic music from Captain Blood, I guess. This has an interrupted cadence, interrupted by the scurrying strings, which brings the work to its final cadence in big-boned, Korngoldian fashion. Okay, so this is another set of recordings I've been collecting on the Chandos label by John Wilson and the Sinfonia of London. They really haven't missed yet either, although none of these haven't become like my favorite recordings of any of these works, but I have enjoyed them all. They always come up with compelling programs like this one, and they've recorded a lot of Korngold in the past, so I think they're especially good in that on this album. The Metamorphosen work here is excellent, but I've heard more glowing performances in the past, as I've said. I think the quicker tempo he takes something away from the work's shimmer and its kind of Mahlerian and Straussian romantic quality as the lines move more quickly, but the work is intellectually satisfying at this tempo. Korngold, as always with his music, is a real Viennese find. He's got a lot of clever ideas. The whole program is excellent, but if you don't know the Korngold, at least hear this album for that. And I guess the Schrecker too, which I need to hear again now. This ensemble has recorded a bit of Korngold's music before. They have a special way with it, and it's a good way to get to know it. I should mention that I mentioned the old Karajan recording of Metamorphosen. He lived through the war too, and they had a really intense sense of what was lost. It's not just the culture though, just people. There were less people. Yeah. So many people died so horribly in war, as they always do. I think it's not quite the same as kind of losing. we didn't really. It wasn't quite as traumatic for us to lose like the world we had, world we had to computers. But there's a lot of trauma being worked through in these works too. So we want to keep that in mind. So I guess like with newer performers like John Wilson, I mean, they didn't live through anything this traumatic, but yet they're, conducting this very traumatic music. And I guess it doesn't come across as well as, it's still good though. I mean, it's all there, but I think, I think a guy like Karajan in his mind's eye could really imagine, or even like, I think Bernstein recorded this too, what it was like before the entire world changed. Anyway, third classical album, we're going to the saxophone here. An album called The Saxophone Craze by Jonathan Radford on the saxophone and Ashley Fripp on the piano on the Champs Hill label, which is a British label, a very small British label. This is an album exploring the music of the Roaring '20s. And it's a pretty good history lesson, I'll say that. It features the saxophone, the devil's horn, as it was known at the time. The devil plays a lot of instruments. He plays the violin, he plays the horn, the saxophone,
Well, I mean, apparently, if you read the religious descriptions of Satan, he was music. Like his body was able to be all instruments, or he embodied all of these different instruments. So.
And yet there's music in heaven. Go figure.
Certainly, ever since R&B and rock and roll came out, and jazz, that the sax was a sinful sound to lure young people into all sorts of sinful types of behavior from that seductive sax. So it all started in the 1920s, right?
Yeah, it did. With all those, one of the interesting things about reading the notes here is you get more of a sense of, again, this is after another war, World War I, and at that time, people wanted to forget the war and have fun.
Yep.
And this, especially in America, if you remember, also Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald in France in the 20s, where alcohol was legal. There was prohibition in the U.S., yet people partied all the time. The Gershwins wrote musicals about how people were going to these speakeasies and wrote all these songs about it and things like that. People just wanted to have fun.
Sure.
And that's what led to this cultural explosion in the 1920s, all the big swing bands and the takeoff of jazz and things like that, and what's called the saxophone craze, which this album is named after. The central figure of the program is saxophonist, I hope I'm saying this right, Rudy Wiedoeft. You ever hear of this guy?
Nope.
He's a major in the saxophone history, though. He's a hugely virtuosic and prolific musician known as the Chrysler of the saxophone. Yeah, back at that time, they would have always made classical references to the great players, because the great Western musicians were classical players and jazz was a new form of music.
Right.
Okay. So I guess Art Tatum would have been the Rachmaninoff. I don't know. They never called him anything, though.
T for two.
T for two. All right. Actually, Wiedoeft was responsible for the saxophone craze. Let me spell that name for you. Wiedoeft. Rudy Wiedoeft. I'm saying it like it's a German name, but I'm not sure it's pronounced that way. A cultural phenomenon that would secure the future of the saxophone. So through his music is mostly forgotten today, but in the 1920s and 30s, Rudy Wiedoeft's music had an astronomical impact. The music on this album has helped shape the saxophone into what it has become today. His music had a joie de vivre to it that people longed for after the horrors of the war. And his signature piece was a piece called Saxophobia, which we don't hear on this album, unfortunately. I would have liked to have heard that. You can hear it on YouTube, which is one of the wonderful things about living today, is that you can just go hear these works that I never would have heard if there were no internet. I mean, I'm certainly not going to go out and search for a record called Saxophobia, but I'm glad I got to hear it. It came out in 1920 and sparked a saxophone craze that swept America within months of its release. And I think that saxophone craze really lasted well into the 1960s. Until rock and roll kind of came along in the 50s, really. But jazz was still competing with rock and roll until the 60s, I think. Wiedoeft was born in Detroit, Michigan in 1893. His family originally from Germany. And he was a violinist at first, but he broke his bowing arm when he was 10 years old in a cycling accident. He took up the clarinet after that, became a professional player. And then he learned the saxophone by going to, I guess, oboe teachers or clarinet teachers, and kind of got his technique from that, because no one was teaching the saxophone. It wasn't a popular instrument. It was considered to be a toy, actually, by Americans at the time. The early jazz bands, but they didn't have saxophones in them.
No, clarinet.
Yeah. So a little history there. So he has this sliding legato style that kind of is reminiscent of wind instruments like the clarinet and the oboe. So he sort of invented that style. It also apparently left its mark on Bing Crosby, who acknowledged Wiedoeft's influence on his smooth crooning vocal technique. Okay, you can read about Wiedoeft's colorful life, including his his alcoholism and his fights with his wife. In the booklet notes. I will leave that to you. I wrote here, including the descent into alcoholism that was de rigueur at the time, required. Basically, everybody was an alcoholic back then. I don't know. And he died of cirrhosis on 18th February 1940, the same year that F. Scott Fitzgerald died. Probably the same thing, because he had done himself in with alcohol. Radford, Jonathan Radford, the saxophonist on this album, claims that Wiedoeft's playing could easily have been inspired by the violin. He applied his sense of string legato and articulation to the saxophone. Okay, so this is a really interesting program, but the performances are, well, actually, they're a mixed bag, let's say.
Yeah.
All right, let's get started. This doesn't start terribly well, really, and that's a shame because the early works on this album are works I hadn't heard before. The first, and I wanted to, and this is my first listen to them, and they really just didn't take off. So let's, the first work is written by Justin Ring and Fred Hager, 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 Danse Hongroise. Let me get my French out there. This was transcribed by Rudy Wiedoeft, and this pays homage to classical music's fascination with gypsy music, which goes back to Haydn's time. You heard a lot in Brahms and Liszt.
Yeah,
and
it's a Hungarian dance, basically.
It's a Hungarian dance, basically. The piano sound on this... Okay, now the recording is also a little odd. It starts not so well, but by the end, it actually sounds a lot better. The piano sound on this first track, it sounds like a bit pasted on. It's a bit two-dimensional, like it's been smushed into like a flat cage. It's been smushed.
There's a New York word for you. Smushed.
Smushed. Yeah, no one else is going to say that. It might be from Yiddish.
Yeah, probably.
That's probably why we know all these words, because a lot of Yiddish speaking in New York. Anyway, it has a nice glaze of room sound on it. It sounds like the recording was mic'd to get the sax sounding at its best, and they just ignored the piano because it doesn't really sound very present. The actual Hungarian theme in this starts at 1 minute and 54 seconds. There's a nice change in the sax's tone at 2 minutes and 30 seconds. And there's some good athletic playing from the saxophone. It's an enjoyable light piece. I think there's more passion in it than we hear on this particular performance. But it's impressive playing still. Okay, so I think a little more could have been pulled out of that. Second track is by Rudy Wiedoeft and Domenico Savino, called Dans l'Orient, which is in the Orient. And this pays homage to the fashion for all things exotic, present through the 20s in everything from the Fairground Palais de Danse Orientale to the Orientalist designs of Art Deco cinemas in the USA and everywhere else, I guess. I'm thinking when they say the Orient here, they're talking about Arab lands, because I know this doesn't sound very, because they always have those angular Chinese sort of, when they want to evoke China, but they're not doing that here.
In the sax cadenza, there's these sort of Middle Eastern modes that he picks up a little bit.
I think that's what it is,
Orient. It's in there, At the time, that was probably very Oriental,
Right. Well, that's part of the Orient, because even in Ravel's work, Scheherazade, it starts talking about Arab countries, as I guess a work called Scheherazade would, but then it goes to China later. You got to get those Chinese kind of themes in there. Anyway, this starts with a smooth, buttery sax tone. A faster section starts at 1 minute and 45 seconds, then back to the slower opening section. At 2 minutes and 45 seconds, we hear Radford's low end tone, and it's pretty rich and intriguing. This piece sounds more like walking through the woods at twilight, mysterious, than anything stereotypically Oriental. But I guess the mysterious East is evoked in the quiet, creeping rhythm, and as Russ said, in any kind of modal sort of melodies. All right, now the work I was really interested in hearing comes next. This is Erwin Schulhoff, and it has a great title, Hot Sonate. Okay? Or Hot Sonata in English. It's got a French title, Hot Sonate. And it mixes jazz elements with classical form. I generally like works like this. I find them really fun. But this performance, I feel, really doesn't put this work across. Anyway, Schulhoff was born in Prague, and he interrupted work on his jazz oratorio, HMS Royal Oak, to compose this piece. The first movement has a kind of Louis Moreau Gottschalk, like, if you know this pianist from the 1840s, 1830s. He was popular in Paris. He's an American pianist from New Orleans. He has this piece called Le Banjo. And this has this kind of banjo strumming theme in the accompaniment as the sax plays rich roulade material. Stylish, really more than it's hot. I was just wondering if this movement's rhythmic profile wouldn't have benefited more from a faster tempo and more emphatic playing. And I went to the internet to hear this piece because I felt like it wasn't being put across here. And indeed, it's better on YouTube. Just listen to some of the performances there. The second movement, no, please, I don't want to I just feel like there's not much enthusiasm being put into this particular work. And I don't want to damn the album. Don't get rid of it yet because there's good stuff coming up. Anyway, movement 2, I'm not getting much of a jazz feel from this. It sounds more like polite salon classical music. We get some jazzy rhythms in the piano just before the first movement, but I feel like the momentum isn't being built up enough to put this music across. I hear the idiomatic jazz riffs in the sax, but the playing isn't really hot enough to make this really come off. Third movement is a blues, played in wailing style by the sax, and it's good, but again, the players err on the side of refinement and caution. Going for sound effects more than feel. The piano isn't doing much to help by just playing the repeated chords, as though they're like just quarter notes. Dun, dun, dun. They should sound more spring-loaded, like they're pushing, like they'd be pushing the violin off. To hear what I mean, you can go to YouTube and listen to some of the performances on there. He sounds like he's just reading this off the score and marking time. And in a jazz work, that's not really a good approach here. When he gets a few riffs to play, he doesn't make them sound bluesy. It's all too genteel. And it's not like he doesn't have the ability to do this. I mean, we'll hear later in Rhapsody in Blue that he seems to really enjoy playing this because he puts across the jazz elements really well. I think he's just doesn't like this piece.
Could be, yeah.
I don't know. I wanted to hear more to it, though. The fourth movement is a movement that should be played with more excitement generated in the phrasing and rhythm, but it sounds matter-of-fact here. I can hear the jazz elements of the piece, but they're not being drawn out nearly enough by the musicians here. This movement is a faster one and has a 1920s jazz dance quality to it. There's a quieter, wistful middle section with some satisfying turns of phrase in the melody. Too subtle, careful, and genteel to register, as it should, though, as a jazzy piece. Again, check out some YouTube videos. I feel like this piece deserved better. It's actually a lot better piece than it sounds like here. So, sorry, guys. You should try it again. Anyway, 7th, Rudy Wiedoeft. We get 2 waltzes from him. The first one is called Waltz Llewellyn. This and the next piece are miniatures created to fit one side of a 78 RPM record, reminiscent of Fritz Kreisler's violin encore pieces. In this piece, too, it's a waltz. This is more in the classical wheelhouse, but the piano is too matter-of-fact. Once the waltz starts at about 20 seconds in, things feel more carefree. But again, I feel like it could have been made of the rhythm, which is too straight. There's no real sense of the dancing quality of the waltz here. I do like Ashcroft's playing in this, though. The second of the 2 works is Valse Marilyn, and this one comes across with more sensitivity and subtlety than the previous one. It's taken beautifully with nice phrasing from Ashcroft. The pauses and retards at the end of phrases are all well taken. He gets some nice roulades off at the end as well. Good emphatic ending. Okay, what I recommend to listeners is to start this album at you should hear tracks 1 through 8 later, but start at track 9 because this is where things start getting good. The players really seem to be interested in this music at this point. This is Kurt Weill extracts from the Threepenny Opera, and it sounds to me like the musicians from this point on really are really into all the music they're playing. It's almost like 2 different recordings. This particular Kurt Weill extracts from Threepenny Opera are the highlight of the album. Weill, of course, integrates classical and jazz styles in his compositions. The pianist is pretty careful with the accompaniment, making sure we hear all the moving inner harmonic notes, and he's full of character and gets it right here. Once the sax comes in, it all sounds smooth and appealing. I liked the interpretation of Mac the Knife. The sax occasionally sounds like a clarinet in this, which I thought was really cool. It's a pretty arrangement. By the way, the arrangement is by Radford and Jonathan Radford, and the pianist Ashley Fripp. So I guess they're really digging their arrangement. They play it exceptionally well. The piano's recorded sound has improved on this track, too. It's more present and has more of a rounded sound. It doesn't sound like a two-dimensional anymore. Must have been recorded on a different day with different mics or something. All right, next these are all extracts from we get Ballad of the Pleasant Life, good arrangement, good feeling, Polly's song. This one's taken quietly, beautifully played. Radford's saxophone is highly lyrical on these tracks. Tango Ballad, the tango idiom in this comes across very well. Another nice lyrical performance by Radford, and Ashley has the measure of the tango rhythm in this. And finally, the canon song. Radford's sax comes up sounding like a clarinet again in this. Nice smooth sound, characterful, idiomatic performance of this famous tune. Track 14 is Dmitri Shostakovich, Waltz Number 2 from Suite for Variety Orchestra. This is also arranged by Jonathan Radford and Ashley Fripp, the two musicians playing it. This sounds like a mechanical fairground waltz, maybe like on a carousel or maybe on one of these wind-up.
It's got that papa piano bass, right, kind of thing going on.
That's probably what Shostakovich was after here. Yeah. It could be played as a straight waltz too, but I think he wants it to be more sort of, not characterful of the waltz. Ironic, I guess, in a way. The duo sound at home in this brief piece. Maybe more emotion could have been put into it, but this works well as a 20th century take on the waltz, as an idiomatic look back at, not idiomatic, ironic look back at the 20th century, at the 19th century. Finally, we get Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, arranged for 3 saxophones, alto, soprano, and tenor, all played by Radford, and piano. And this is the arrangements by Jun Nagao. The opening bend on the saxophone sounds great and is well taken by Radford. The piano sound has gained a dimension since the beginning of this album. It's more full sounding. Ashley is fairly characterful in Gershwin's stylings, but he hands over most of the interesting parts to Radford on the saxophone. Ashley doesn't have a great jazz feel on the piano, but he's good in this piece. It's probably a piece he's had some background with. It sounds like he gets it. The sax is integrated into the score well. It's an interesting arrangement, and it works well. Radford plays idiomatically with some interesting ad-libs in this score. It sounds like he really likes the work. It sounds like an enthusiastic performance. And the arrangement is varied enough in its approach to keep the ear interested. The soulful, quiet segment preceding the build-up to the ending theme is atmospheric on the sax. The grand ending theme is taken slowly and in a stately way. In works like this, this work works, particularly given the instrumentation. We hear some impressive piano playing on the track in the section preceding this one and at the end. Not a terribly full recorded sound on this album, but tone and detail register nicely. The ensemble seemed to get inspired only from the Kurt Weill works on. So this is really a sort of album. It's half really good and half kind of uninspired. It's recommended with reservations. I would say start at track 9 and go from there.
Yeah, I enjoyed the latter works more myself. The Kurt Weill works, Mac the Knife, and then, the Gershwin, because we're used to hearing his works on clarinet. So
right,
hearing it then done on sax and then splitting it for alto,
and all the
soprano.
way through on sax too.
Yeah, and 3 different saxes. That was kind of interesting for me. The earlier pieces, like you said, I didn't get a lot of inspirational playing vibes from them, rather just sort of more reading from the page. And
I think the program is really interesting, and this album, though, it could have been so much better than it is. That's what's killing me about it. It's
sort of exploring this very important era in the development of the saxophone, but it comes off kind of stale and academic in the interpretation in the earlier works, kind of reading off the page. And
those are the works we really needed the good performances of, because they're all
because those are the ones we don't know. Them. But anyway, if you're kind of a sax scholar or enthusiast and you want to see what was going on in that period, sort of the sax emerging into popular music of the time, jazz, and also how it crossed over into the classical realm. I think that this material would be of great interest. But you might want to seek out other performances of some of these works
Yeah, it's a great history lesson, this album. And the booklet notes are pretty interesting as well.
Right.
If you wind up with the CD.
Yeah.
Speaking of saxophone.
All right, is it jazz time?
It's jazz. Well, I think we've already kind of morphed into jazz in a way.
Well, since it's sax night, our sax episode here, we're going to have a lot of sax.
Let's have sax.
Let's have sax. Yeah, let's talk about sax.
Let's have more sax.
And we're gonna have group sax on a lot of these recordings because there's saxes going all over the place here. That's one of the problems. I'm kind of navigating without a map on some of these recordings because there's a lot of players, and especially the second recording. But these are the second and third are very new recordings, and I don't think we can get the CDs yet in Japan, but I wanted to get them out there.
This is one of the issues with listening on streaming, and especially a lot of jazz players are recording or releasing their records like only on streaming,
right?
And you don't have any credits. You don't know if you have, say, 3 saxes on an album. You don't know who's playing what.
Exactly.
You know? It's kind of
so that's the one of the difficulties with this program we've got tonight. But I'll do my best anyway. So we're going to start out with a real. Now I won't even say sax master. This guy. Let me say, this is the Woodwing King. Now, you might think you have some instruments in your collection. You might think you play some different instruments, but you are not going to compare it to Doug Webb, who we're going to check out first here with his new recording on Positone Records. So this one goes back to last month. It's called The Message, and this one got my interest right away because it was sax with organ, Hammond B3, and we're always big fans of any organ recordings. So this got
especially this one because this is who?
Yeah, we got Brian Charette.
We love him
before. Yeah, great Hammond B3 player.
Yeah,
and we've got multiple sax players on here, but about Webb himself, he's actually born in Chicago, but at a young age moved to California, and he got his music degree back on the East Coast in Boston's Berklee College of Music, also studying clarinet, saxophone, and flute. Now, that's where in the modern woodwind player, if you see a big band or various jazz sax performers often double up on different instruments. So we'll hear some flute. We had a tenor player with the soprano. But Doug Webb has got a little bit more in his arsenal, we could say. Before we get to that, over his career, he's played and recorded with some of the greatest names in jazz: Horace Silver, Freddie Hubbard, Stanley Clarke, Quincy Jones. Who else we got in the pop realm? Rod Stewart, Carly Simon, Kenny Rogers, Bonnie Raitt, more jazz, Pancho Sanchez. He was being out on the West Coast, he did some TV work, Dennis Miller TV show, Doc Severinsen Big Band, and he's done some soundtrack work featuring his solos, Mystic River, $1 Million Baby, and Jersey Boys. The
Jersey
Frankie
Boys.
Valli down there, right?
Frankie Valli.
Yeah. Now, he also, as I mentioned, plays all of these woodwind instruments. And if you haven't checked out, come over to our Facebook page. I put a video up there from earlier this year where he performs 150 instruments in his collection on one single composition. And there are instruments in there which are, you saw that, right? I mean, there are he's got everything from bassoons and Middle Eastern instruments, everything. He's got soprillo, sopranino, soprano sax, slide saxophones. He's got what did we hear last week? The big clarinet.
The bass clarinet.
Not just the bass clarinet. The one we heard on the Mozart.
the Bassett.
Yeah, the Bassett clarinet. He's got that in there too.
Wow.
All kinds of double reeds. You got to check that out. It's just amazing. And all sorts of ethnic instruments too. A lot of them, and some of the other like Frankenstein type instruments that must be one of a kind there. It's very cool. Anyway, on this recording, he's just confined himself to the tenor saxophone, and he has another tenor companion with him. That would be Bob Reynolds, who I believe is the tenor player for Snarky Puppy, popular group.
I like them.
And another sax player. On alto, we've got Greg Osby, kind of a unique player. So we've got 3 saxes in the lineup, and
they're all very different sounding too. So they're pretty easy
sounding.
To pull out. Yeah,
but I'm not always sure between the tenor players because I've heard Doug Webb play on a lot of things, but I don't have a real concept of his personality.
Well, they're like 2 different timbres. One of them is really kind of almost rounded and smooth, and the other one has like a bit of a buzz to it,
I believe Webb has the smoother sound. I think that's the characteristic of his tenor sound, is this very kind of smooth type of sound based on the equipment that he's using. And Reynolds is a little bit more, I don't want to say has a rough tone, but in comparison, it might be a little bit more.
You don't want to say it's a rough tone. He's an edgy tone. Maybe would be better. He's kind of going for something a little wilder. Yeah. And
Osby has a very, of course he's on alto here. Not only is his tone unique, but his phrasing concept is a little bit out there in comparison. So it makes for an interesting recording. And Charette on organ, so he's also covering the bass with the pedals. And we've got Charles.
Boy, does he shine on this record. This is a great record, I thought.
It's really a lot of fun here. It's just mostly really hard driving swing. And we've got Charles Ruggiero on drums, who lays down the beat here. So I'm not going to say I don't exactly know on the tenors who's playing what here. And I don't have the notes. I looked online to get them. But until I get the CD, I won't know for sure. But you're going to get a lot of hard driving and fun tunes on this recording. We start out with a Webb original called Caught in the Web, fitting title.
With 2 Bs, yeah.
Yeah, a very big swinger of a 12-bar blues that also has a bridge. So they usually do like a 12-bar and then the bridge between, and then one more blues chorus. All the saxes come out in force, harmonized on the melody, and it's sort of all laid over this kind of bubbling, percolating, walking bass line by Charette on the organ.
Yeah.
First, we get a tenor takes center stage. I think it's Webb who starts this out because it's that smooth tone, but like I say, I'm not sure because I don't have notes here. The other sax is back behind it, and then that tenor moves into the solo. The sax is solo in succession, all blowing hard. It's tenor, alto, tenor in the succession of solos. After a repeat of the melody, there's some held out chords for additional jamming, and then an extra crank up of the organ by Charette at the end to finish it up. So there's a really big swinger, blues with a bridge to get things started.
I want to say, by the way, about this, that Charette does a lot to really make this album, go over it, because it sounds like he's just thrilled to be playing with these guys, because when he plays the bass, he's playing the bass with his feet, on the organ. It just sounds like he's just bouncing off the pedals, like he's got such energy, and this is really going to be the case in a track that's coming up. Yeah. But I really feel like he pushes this recording like over the top. He has a lot to do with why it sounds so energetic.
It sounds bigger than it is. I mean, it sounds like a larger ensemble all the time, and the enthusiasm and energy just it leaks out from every single tune.
Everybody's got that energy. It's not just him, but I just noticing it so much from him.
Yeah, he makes the recording. The concept of the sound is formed by the organ.
Yeah.
The next tune is an Osby original, Nekide. It looks kind of like naked. I want to think he's naked.
Nekideb.
Yeah, Nekide. Nekide. This one starts with some swinging sax lines that come in. Then Charette brings up the bass. Osby comes up first. It's his own tune, so he solos. He's got this very angular and trilly kind of solo, kind of odd. He has his own odd concept of phrasing, as I said. Charette adds chord stabs behind as Osby gets exploring into kind of outer harmonic regions here. There's a little layering of saxes for a buffer between the alto solo and the next tenor solo. Charette is listening intensely, you can tell, and he adds lots of answering lines to what's going on in the solo. He's really cued into here. There's another sax interplay before the next tenor solo too. These chords in this tune that Osby's composed lend themselves to rather angular and angsty kind of phrases. It's not a kind of smooth type of progression. And then after the solos, all three saxes join in for a little feeding frenzy where they're all jamming out there, and a final unusual cadence of ending chords. Underneath that sax work, there's hard driving through and good interplay between Charette and Ruggiero on the drums there. The third tune is called The Message. And here we've got the composer is listed as S. Hofstetter. I don't know who that is. But anyway, this one's a driving minor, kind of hard boppy tune set around two alternating chords. Builds up some tension. Another good sax harmonized arrangement of this intense melody. It simmers down a little bit when the first tenor solo comes up. This time we've got back-to-back tenor solos here that trade off, and they're both smoking with intensity. Osby follows up on alto, a little bit more harmonically adventurous than the tenors. He really does have a unique phrasing concept compared. It's a nice contrast between the other two horns here.
This whole album is so interesting for really a lot of reasons. It's not just Charette and the phrasing by the altos. There's so many interesting things happening on this.
Lots of good stuff going on. And they wrap it up going through the melody of the tune once more. We're going to go traditional with a little Gershwin tune. Next, I Was Doing All Right. This one begins with a very bouncy swing feel that Charette provides on the organ. The saxes trade off on the melody here, weaving harmonic lines behind each other. Osby's up first on the alto, then the tenors in succession. Everything is bubbling and happy because of Charette's organ groove. Charette gets an organ solo himself on this one, with melodic and clearly articulated notes. He often likes to use a very straight tone to start things out on the organ. So he'll have, the stops pulled out for a clear tone, not much Leslie spinning, and he focuses on articulation a lot, as he does in this tune. Now we've got a tune by Reynolds, the sax player, called Frustration, track 5. Funky and swinging sax melody here. The line turns into a minor blues once the first tenor solo comes up. Charette fans the flames nicely with hits and tension-building chords. After that first tenor solo, Osby is next. Again, a little more harmonically adventurous ideas before another tenor solo after that. And then Charette gets in on the fun too. Sparse at the beginning, and then getting some very percussive repeated notes. They do some solo trading off, a horn taking the first 4 bars of the blues chorus, and then the drums taking the 8 afterwards before they hit the melody once more. That's kind of a interesting trade-off. Normally we're going to have trading 4s or trading 8s, but here we've got the blues form, so 4 and then 8 with the drums. So breaks it up kind of nice. And get some drum work in there too.
This is Frustration now, right?
Frustration, yeah.
Yeah, the organ solo on this was really fantastic, really funky. Yeah, and then while he's playing this, he's got that walking bass going. It's a high energy bass as well. It just sounds so fantastic on that solo.
It just sounds like
a real standout for me.
Sounds bigger than it is. That organ just just really makes it sound like a huge ensemble. Track 6 is called Doug's Dilemma, and this is a composition by Randy Aldcroft, who's also a trombonist, composer, maybe a friend of Webb's. I think he's active on the West Coast. And this is ballad, so slow it down for this one. One tenor, I think this is Webb here, who carries the melody, sounding sweet, very nice organ sound behind there. The other saxes weave in with harmony. Osby's higher tone on the alto stands out, making a nice contrast in the sax arrangement. The tenor solo works up in emotional intensity to a nice climax before the other horns join in again. Then it eases to a tenor solo sax to the end of the tune. Nice tone selection by Charette with the silky organ chords underneath. That sort of very light, gospel-y kind of tone. Track 7, Keeping Up with the Joneses. This is a Aldcroft composition. Medium swinging tune here. Good sax arrangement on the melody. It's more a relaxed vibe, and the tenors reflects that in both their solos. However, Osby's solo in between sounds more frantic in comparison. Ruggiero is doing a lot of nice fills and textures on the drums in this one, and Charette gets the final solo with happy and bluesy lines over this constantly chugging bass pedals that moves the tune along. Once more around the melody and a happy ending. Leaves you in a good mood, as this whole album does, but especially this track. Then we've got another Aldcroft composition, 8, New Beginning. This one's got kind of a samba beat to it. Ruggiero keeps the new beat moving in style as the saxes sail through this breezy harmonized melody. Osby solos first with lines full of rhythmic turning phrases. Then we've got nice breezy tenor solo. This might be Webb up first here. He quotes a fascinating rhythm, fits it over the harmonies, like that old melody. The second solo gets a bit more animated with some fast lines, tumbling phrases, and high register notes before it settles down. And then Charette is up next, starting with that pure tone that he likes at first. He pulls out some speedy running figures between little staccato melodic phrases, and this tune stands out. It's nice to have a Latin tune to break up all of the hard swinging that's going on the recording. Yeah. Then we're going to go to a Forrest and Wright tune, the old Bog Bulls, Bangles and Beads, old standard that Frank Sinatra sang.
That's the one I know.
Yeah.
That's how I know it too. It's funny you should say that. Because he sang this. Yeah.
Yep. A good old American songbook tune, and they give it a nice medium swing that it deserves here. Tenor and alto trade off lines before all three come in on the arrangement. There's a solo break into a tenor solo, and then Charette has dark comping going on underneath the tart sax. Nice contrast of tones. There's another break for Osby's even tartar alto tone. Think tartar sauce with lemon, and you get that kind of taste of the alto here. Similar fashion of the break for tenor 2 and the solo. And then Charette gets a go around as well before they let us hear the swinging melody arrangement once more. And track 10, another Reynolds tune, Where Did You Come From? Question mark. That's the name of the tune. An intro of rising sax lines. A single tenor carries the main melody here into a bigger sax arrangement that brings back kind of rising lines. This one has a light Latin even beat feel to it. There's a contrasting second section of the melody that builds up tension with syncopated phrases. Then things simmer down for the first tenor solo with snaking lines that kind of slither over these interesting chord changes. Sandwiched in between is Osby with the solo. Has a lot of dexterous phrases in here. He's got all these really interesting patterns snaking through the harmonies that he works in here. He builds up the solo nicely, followed up by another tenor solo that's very charged as well. And then Charette too. It's a cool solo by Charette. Impressive speedy lines with some percussive chords, and he gets some Leslie fun swirling up with the action at the end. After a repeat of the melody, they vamp out for a little while, and Ruggiero gets some time for some intense drumming. And we end up with a Charette original, Bonnie Lass. And this one is a medium swing tune, a full sax arranged opening that trades the melody back and forth with Charette's organ. Charette gets to solo a bit. Osby blows a solo himself with a topsy-turvy, fast phrases that will spin your head around on this one. And then the two tenors go next, still sounding inspired, all the way to the end on this last tune, never running out of cool ideas. So it's a real swinging recording. Tons of positive energy. You can tell they're enjoying themselves. 3 saxes, a Hammond organ, and nice tight drumming. This is recommended for all sax and organ fans, anyone who likes just swinging along jazz in general. Lots of positive energy, good grooves, and great sax.
Great sax and great, all kinds of, like you said, Osby's interesting figures. Brian Charette's fantastic play. This one goes right into the collection and may even be in the running for my top 10.
Oh, wow.
Jazz albums of the year, as you know. Well, I don't know yet. We'll have to see. Although that list is kind of growing, already. Yeah. There are a few things on there. Like we heard that, the Foltz one with the bass clarinet. And, There are all kinds of cool things already this year. So, as you know, at the end of the year, Russ picks his 10 favorite classical albums. I picked my friend favorite jazz ones, and then we fill it. We fill out each other's lists with the other stuff we like. Yeah, we do that because I'm afraid, just in case, like, say Russ will leave something out of the jazz, I want to put this in, so that's what we do. Anyway, this is excellent high energy album. Charette delivers more than his share of the goods. I really love the Hammond organ, and he's just fantastic on this record, even more so than on his, because I went back and listened to his solo.
I think he sounds better here. He sounds more excited.
Yeah, I thought he sounded better here too. That's often the case, though, when people are kind of sidemen. I guess they feel freer. There's no pressure on them.
Right.
Like they're just going to play a solo, but they're kind of, if they're the leader of the project, they've got a lot of things to think about. And I think that sort of preoccupies them. Could be. But he sounds better here than he did on that album, I thought. He propels this album to a higher level, but everybody does, really. It's a really interesting album.
Really great playing.
Feels good, put you in a good mood. I know there are a lot of people out there that aren't very happy now, but this is something you'll want to listen to. It'll kind of, at least for 40, 50 minutes. How long was this, an hour?
It's about an hour.
Yeah, it's about an hour long, this album. It'll put you in a good place. It was really good.
And definitely check out our Facebook page or go on YouTube and search Doug Webb and then see that 150 instrument video. It'll knock your socks off.
Oh boy.
I think maybe his wife said, "You have all these instruments, but you never play them." And he said, "Oh yeah." And so he played them all on one tune. If you think you have a bunch of instruments, you don't have as many as Doug Webb does. That's for sure. All right, we're gonna go Cuban next.
All right.
Now, this is the album that's the hardest. This one just came out last week, and it has a whole cast of characters on it, and we got no album. It's available online, so we're going to have to do some guesswork here. This is the latest release by saxophonist Carlos Averhoff Jr., and, of course, there's a senior. Carlos Averhoff Sr. is a successful and celebrated Cuban saxophonist. And, sadly, this album is called Together. The idea was that he was going to record this album with his father, who passed away during its production, and only appears here, as far as I can tell, on one track. Averhoff Jr., was working on this, and this was going to be their first collaborative work together, but his father departed too soon to complete it. So it turns out to be kind of tribute to his father. Nice album cover work here, if you see this sort of balanced black and white juxtaposition of representing the two father and son images in saxophone here. Now, we've got a full cast of musicians here. Averhoff Jr. appears on tenor sax. He's got a real gutsy sound as the main player here. We've got a lot of the other players, though. Jim Gassier on piano, Nestor Del Prado on bass, Renier Guerra on drums, guest Chucho Valdez on piano, Nicky Orta also on bass, Juan Manguia, trumpet and flugelhorn, Juan Wickley, Nogueras, conga, Nestor Torres, flute, Sherman Velzaco, alto sax, Orlando Maracavalle also on flute, Horacio El Negro Hernandez on drums, Maggie Marquez on voice on one track, Federico Britos violin, Ahmed Barroso guitar, Richie Zalong also on guitar, Cesar Lopez alto saxophone, and Carlos Averhoff Sr. soprano saxophone. So, who's playing on what track? We don't really know. But some of it will be apparent, especially on track one. It's called A Sequence for You. It starts with a 2-minute piano opening, dramatic chords, and impossible sounding run. It's all signatures of Chucho Valdez. So
right. He's very classical sounding on this too, which is kind of interesting too.
He brings that sort of explosive runs and frantic kind of thing to it. So it's obviously him on this track here. That intro on piano and then Latin percussion leads to Averhoff's tenor bringing in the horn arrangement on this grooving melody. We get a very funky Latin electric bass solo, underlaid by some interesting piano chords from Valdez. Next, more tight horn lines with good intensity. Averhoff gets his first tenor solo of the album here. He has a full muscular kind of tone, licks that snap into that groove. It must be in that Cuban blood that they can do jazz, but it all comes back to that rhythm, and it locks right in here. We get a really nice trumpet solo from Munguia also here, next showing off a lot of dexterity, and then the true horn, sax, and trumpet trade off after that. Things quiet down for a while then to a slow build-up of a piano solo over congas and drums. It gets really hot and bothered with crazy fast lines that Chucho Valdez is known for. Then we get more tightly arranged horns on the melody section. Things get kind of a halftime feel for a percussion breakdown between horn and bass and piano lines that I've slowed up to fit the percussion in, and then they push to the end. Track 2 is called The Magician. Here, a slow grooving tune. The melody is carried with flute layered on top of tenor for a nice sound spread. You've got that kind of octave spread with different tonalities. There's some cool stops and chordal surprises in the tune. First up is this fun, fluttery flute solo that has that bird-like tonal quality to it.
I really liked this.
Yeah, it really twitters and bristles the hairs on your neck from that tone. That kind of very bright flute sound. Stylish piano solo. Next, I'm guessing this is obviously not Chucho Valdez. This must be Jim Gassier here. A nice piano solo. A very gutsy tenor solo from Averhoff. Next, packed with tight rhythmic licks. And then we go back to the sax and flute melody, which sounds even more smooth this time and placid after those adventurous solos. The drums kick up the intensity to the final softer ending notes. Track 3 is Together, title track here. 2 saxes on the fun disjointed melody that has some close intervals in the harmonies. There's a piano solo next that's quite playful. Averhoff is up next also playfully getting into the upper register and throwing in some bluesy ideas on tenor. Then we've got alto. I'm not sure who it is. It must be one of the two, Velasco or Lopez on the alto solo. Some harmonic tension and fun, smeared runs with a very tart tone on the alto. Both saxes joined back in on the loopy melody for another round through it. Track 4 is called Oriented Conga. And you get a big conga intro for this one, joined by drums, then Averhoff's tenor over the intensifying beat. Add flute, and by the time bass and piano join in, the sax and flute lines are tight and flighty. There's some stop time and groove change-ups under the melody that keeps things exciting. And then here, another intense flute solo. It's a very different quality flute here. This is a darker tone flute. I think this might be Nestor Torres. This sounds more like what I've heard from him in the past on this one. Then we're going to get another hot tenor solo from Averhoff before a return into the kind of intro with percussion, tenor, and flute reintroduction. The piano joins along and jams out as the tune fades out. Track 5 is Beatrice. This one has kind of tart and clipped tenor licks that are joined by angular guitar before the rest of the rhythm section kicks in. It goes from intense...
if those words also describe Beatrice.
Yeah.
She's kind of tart.
She's such a tart.
Trying to picture what kind of woman this would be.
Yeah.
If this is the theme they're giving her.
Yeah. It goes from intense and syncopated to a little more settled as the tenor and guitar next trade off melody lines before going back to the angular intro style again. A unique and percussive piano solo is up first, and then Averhoff is next. A more lyrical solo start. He becomes more intense as he reaches the climax of his solo. And I guess the guitarists here are Richie Zellom. He's got a solo. It's got very interesting phrasing, cool double stop lines. Turns into next an ominous piano vamp section for some drum solo time with intense tom work. And then tenor and guitar join back in for the final push to the end. Let's see, we've got track 6, En la orilla del mundo. This one has a pretty guitar intro, and then some melody on violin by Federico Britos that lead into the vocals by Maggie Marquez, who herself has a rich voice and a very nice Spanish enunciation. The phrasing just matches these musical phrases well. The violin and sax add some counterlines under the vocals here and there throughout the verse. And then in between these verses, violin and Averhoff trade off some solos. It's very interesting. The pitch on the violin is very wavering. So it gives it this kind of,
this was kind of
swooning quality around the center of the pitch. Whether it's stylistic or unnerving, you can decide how you feel.
I didn't know what to make of this myself. I was kind of, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think I prefer a more focused violin sound,
right.
But she's going for something folky
It's
here,
a little
I think.
kind of drunken folkiness to it. Marquez is back for some more vocals, and then the violin and sax add more background to the tune. Track 7, I like this title, Not for Everybody. It's an uninclusive tune. Starts with some intense repeated...
We need more non-inclusivity.
Yes, we do. Yeah, I think we're doing a good job so far on the podcast. This one's got intense repeated alto and tenor phrases to start it out. The sax lines are tricky and tight as they swirl and tumble through this crazy melody. Very nice syncopated bass and drum hits underneath. The alto is up first for a solo here. It's a fun slurpy, and I mean slurpy mix of boppy and bluesy lines. Sounds like he's sucking up a milkshake through the saxophone here, but it's very fun. Next, a fun rhythmic dancing piano solo, and then Alvarez has an intense tenor solo connecting together furious lines. There's some unison sax and piano phrases with lots of space for some drum filling, and then some final crazy wavering sax lines on this tune. And we're going to end up the recording with a standard tune, Donna Lee. This one begins with an acoustic bass groove intro that's joined by drums and then piano to make an even more funky groove. The saxes join in on the weaving melody line, and we're going to get soprano sax here. And looking at the brief online credits, I guess this is Averhoff Sr. They must have recorded this before he passed away with his son, Averhoff Jr. on tenor. So Averhoff Sr. gets the first solo on soprano, and then a perky rhythmic piano solo follows up. Acoustic bass solo that works back into the opening groove, Feel Again, and then a short recap of the melody for a quick ending. So it's a recording with lots of energy and enthusiasm, very tight arrangements, especially working the saxes together here, and a trumpet on the tracks that it's on. Good solos, a variety of instruments and different guests. It's a fun Cuban jazz album.
Yeah, it's appealing. It's intellectually satisfying too. It's fairly complicated music actually. Yeah. But not that shouldn't put you off. I mean, I just said it's an easy listen, but it's just kind of
rhythmically
it just
complex.
Feels, and it just feels good to hear it. Syncopated rhythms, a lot of variety on this record too. I especially love, how I love jazz flute. That's one of my things. And I liked this record. I don't think I'm gonna put this in the collection, but I definitely enjoyed listening to it though.
Yeah, I'll be interested to check out more of his recordings in the future. Carlos Averhoff Jr. Sorry for your loss of your father, but this comes as a nice tribute, and some nice companions to put music together as a tribute here. And for our final sexual exploration tonight, we're going to go into a bit of the free realm influence here, a little bit. Not too much, but
I thought this was very appeling. This record, actually, it's really
very interesting,
compelling
here, and a great title by the great saxophonist David Murray. Actually, this album is recorded with equal credits for the trio: David Murray, Brad Jones on bass, Hamid Drake on drums, equal credit on the album cover. And this one just came out last week as well. Seriana Promethea on Intact Records. And also features David Murray's mainly a tenor sax player, but he's got a bass clarinet on the first track here, which is what sold me on this recording.
No, right?
Yeah. So Murray is actually
you got me.
A California native, and his initial influences were more of free jazz musicians like Albert Ayler, Archie Shepp. And for musicians of his generation, he was unique in not being really inspired by the style of John Coltrane. Although he did record a tribute album to Coltrane, which is kind of interesting. Although his style does not reflect that. And he sort of forged his way through the jazz scene, incorporates lots of interesting elements from previous, prior to Coltrane, like Coleman Hawkins, Ben Webster, with this wide vibrato in his style. But he's also done a lot of interesting recordings. He's recorded even with the Grateful Dead. And he was also a founding member of the World Saxophone Quartet with, let's see, who would that be? Oliver Lake, Julius Hemphill, and others. So he's sort of a big name in modern sax, and recorded with other greats such as McCoy Tyner, Elvin Jones, and many more. And so Here we've got his latest recording in a trio format. I think with his kind of free expressive tendencies to, he's got sort of an imagination and exuberance in his solos that can't be contained and may not adhere to some harmonic structures that other people might be thinking of. So with just a bass to outline the harmonic details, it gives him a lot more freedom. This goes back to, say, Sonny Rollins recording without a piano back in the 50s. And that works well. I thought this was a pretty impressive feat to just have one saxophone carrying an entire album with just bass and drums. I mean, he certainly has the ideas to do it. Yeah. So. Yeah, and so you get this free experience, but there's everything is kept well in form, I should say, here. Mm-hmm. And the tight rhythm section keeps things very comprehensible in the pocket, and Murray sort of, even though he likes to get out there with his improvisations, he stays grounded throughout here. And so some interesting choices of tunes and grooves here as well. So let's get into it. We start out with the title track, Seriana Promethea. And this is the only tune that features bass clarinet, and boy, it's a doozy.
It really is. Yeah.
Bass clarinet and bass set a really funky groove right from the beginning with this answering riffs they have going on between each other. Murray amazingly gets a variety of tones out of bass clarinet, from tenor sax like growls, which I've not heard before on bass clarinet. Yeah. Squawks, reed stopping percussive like effects, that are peppered into his solo lines. But he can also get a really kind of rounded, pleasant tone. You'll get a sense right away from the first track that you never know what he's going to play next in his improvisations. Sort of free flow, creative ideas. Jones' bass sounds great on this track, mixing up the bass line grooves underneath with tight drum fills by Drake. This might be the funkiest bass clarinet I've ever heard in my life, but it's really cool.
No, I want to say about the bass, he really carries a lot of the material on this album, too. Mm-hmm. He sounds great throughout.
Yeah,
the very bass creative
soloing is amazing because he's able to do a lot of these very melodic solos, but whenever he solos, the drums sort of just fade to the back and also allow him to carry most of the rhythmic pulse of the piece. So he's able to really keep a steady rhythmic feel while being melodically creative as well. Brad Jones, a very interesting bass player. Track 2, I should mention all the compositions here are by David Murray on this album. Track 2 is Nectar, Necktar. This one begins with a continuous syncopated bass interval and heavy, even beat drumming. The bass notes go unchanged. It's just kind of like a drone effect with this open. I don't know. I forgot if it's like a fourth or something, but it just creates this kind of constant harmonic idea.
It's like a drone.
Yeah, it's a drone. And then Murray comes in on tenor sax over that with a riff and starts improvising around it. Jones changes up the bass line to arpeggios and then walking bass lines before returning to the more static kind of drone idea. Murray's in free range territory to weave lines in lots of harmonic directions. He pulls things back in.
I thought I heard some Arab modes in there too.
Yeah, there's some modes going on there. When the bass is outlining the chordal things, he'll pull back in to be sort of limited in scope by the bass. That's kind of cool. Sort of gives him a grounding. And then when the bass hits that sort of static thing, he'll go out into the outer realms to explore a little bit more. I know when I put this album on, when we got to this one, my wife left the room and closed the door. So I knew things were getting...
this was great. Yeah, I really liked it.
Things were getting interesting at that point. Kind of exploratory and interesting.
I like the kind of rock and roll. What's that bass line? Dun, 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 dun that he does at the end. You hear that in a lot of those old rock songs. There's a name for that. I can't remember what it is.
I don't know. A lot of the beats on this album are rather rock influenced rather than jazz. There's actually only one swinging kind of rhythm.
Right.
So they have a lot of heavy rock feels on here, interestingly.
I think it's really funny that your wife leaves the room.
Yeah, she just left the room.
Plays certain albums.
Yeah. Anything that, gets off the script of soloing with...
we should do a whole episode on like her reactions to the music that we listened to that week.
We have a very limited selection of tunes. What are you going to do? Anyway, when the sax solo winds down, Drake gets a long drum solo, mixing up techniques, but always keeping a pulse through the solo. And then Jones gets a very modally kind of jazz thing. He works off from the original interval riff. It's very rhythmic and unique, and that will sort of typify what goes on for the rest of the album in his solos. Murray returns for some riffing and improvisations for the end, where the beat, interestingly, changes up into swing just for a little bit in the final section. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Then we've got track 3, Metuka Shelley, Ballad for Adrian. This one begins with some very gnarly bass bowing. It gets some kind of...
I always worry when you hear something like this that it's dedicated to a woman. Like, what do they say?
I don't know. Yeah. Some really eerie bass bowing that gets kind of like a guitar feedback type of sound. Also, lots of bending pitch play. There's a little uneasy feeling. It goes on for quite a while. And then ends down low, and then Jones switches up to a plucked bass line. It becomes sort of a repetitive figure and sets the stage for drums and sax to enter with the main melody of the tune. It's a slow ballad feel. Murray is big and breathy with a wide vibrato. You can pick up that Coleman Hawkins, Ben Webster influence of sound, certainly not style, in this modern kind of playing. He treats the melody rather gingerly in comparison here before launching into his improvisations. He has some harmonic flights of fancy, but keeps things mostly grounded into the outlines of the bass harmonic sketches, returning with the melody to the end and getting into the upper register. Another female dedication for 4, Rainbows for Julia.
Yeah, and by this melody, I think they really like Julia, actually. Yeah. It sounds really positive.
This tune is like a melody of riffs that just get repeated while the harmony shifts underneath in the bass. So it's kind of catchy in this repetition. Murray ornaments these little riffs with lots of trills when they repeat through it the second time. The beat is heavy and very rock influenced. Murray weaves in and around, dismantling the riff ideas, and then he strangles the goose, as we like to say in some places.
That sound.
Yeah, getting up in the upper register and just squawking and screeching. Gonna have goose for dinner after this one. Jones gets an extended bass solo here too. As I said, he does this thing where he keeps the rhythmic groove, also being quite melodic in his solo. Drake recognizes that he's doing a lot of the groove work, so he just lays off the drums into some light cymbal work, letting the bass carry most of the beat, which is very cool. Murray comes back in for that riffy melody to finish it off with another go-through. Track 5.
I just want to say before you get into track 5, I'm still thinking of your wife leaving the room. And I, of course, have had this experience myself. But really, I'm often asked, like, how can you listen to music that sounds like this, whatever I happen to be listening to at the time. But what it really comes down to is your musical understanding. What is your musical vocabulary? Right. If you understand what the players are trying to do or what the vocabulary is, then you'll listen to it, even if you're not really enjoying it. There's plenty of music I don't really like so much, but that I'll listen to because I want to hear how it's going to turn out. You know what I mean? sort of like in a movie. And I just want to just encourage listeners to really go for that understanding. I mentioned in an earlier episode the book where the guy said you shouldn't really say I know what I like. You should say I don't what I could like. And if you don't like something that's really complex, it might be because you don't really understand what they're doing, and you should look into it and find out what it is. It is, after all, the American way to try to understand what's going on, you know?
You know, free jazz goes back, almost 60 years now.
Yeah.
And this is not free jazz. It's... Murray's
this is actually pretty appealing, I thought.
Yeah, Murray's inspired.
It had a lot of rock rhythms to it. That really caught me.
Murray's inspired by that freeness of jazz, free jazz, but he brings that spirit to something that's actually quite structured, especially in what the rhythm players are doing. And he may go off on a tangent and, explore some seemingly unrelated kind of harmonic development, but he can do that here because you don't have a chordal instrument. You've just got the bass, and I found that the structures and the beats are clearly outlined, so you never feel really like you're lost in the weeds with what's going on. And you get a clear map of the structure of the tune, and I find his jazz is improvised music, but he is particularly spontaneous and consistently surprising with what kind of creativity comes out. And he's just created a structure for himself where that can be expressed very easily. And that's very appealing.
One of the things that appeals to me about this and about players like this is the spontaneity. I mean, you hear them, you can almost tell that they don't really have this next thing planned. That's just kind of coming out, and that they're in the zone sort of, where it's almost like they're listening to themselves play and they're saying, oh, wow, I wonder where this is coming from. So that's always exciting when that happens.
This is a very bursting with spontaneity, this album. Track 5, Switchin' in the Kitchen. Ooh. This
Great title.
This one's unique, and this was like a calypso feel to it. When you have calypso, you're going to expect a very happy sounding major melody, and that's what you get here. Murray's sax soloing goes off into his usual free-form lines after this happy melody, but he keeps the calypso spirit going with mostly happy major ideas, and he returns to lots of very rhythmic figures, even in his solo explorations. Jones has another long bass solo.
I said loopy for this. It kind of sounds like a little crazy.
It's all that
in a happy way.
Goes back to that Sonny Rollins, St. Thomas and all that. It's that spirit. Jones has another bass solo. Again, lots of melodic ideas with rhythmic pulse. And Drake gets a drum solo here. He keeps the beat going through all of it with the bass drum featuring light cymbal touches. And then Murray returns for a melody recap and a little extra fun at the end. So just an upbeat, happy kind of calypso feel. 6, Anita et Anita.
With two ends,
Yeah, Anita is one end, the second one with two. This one's like a longing type melody set to an even beat at first, but the beat then doubles up and gets a swing feel for a different section that contrasts and then changes back to the original feel. Murray's solos here are more tame, focusing more on phrasing, and but they do become more animated in the swinging section that doubles up in the middle. They go through the melody once more, straight up a little bit to finish up the tune. Then we're going to get a couple interesting ones. Track 7, If You Want Me to Stay. This one begins with a pulsing bass line that gets the tune going with a rock feel. The melody is bluesy.
I thought so.
And Murray blows it with a tight articulation. Then he mixes up a lot of harmonically adventurous lines with more R&B rooted bluesy licks that match the groove of this tune. Jones has another rhythmically interesting bass solo, and then Murray comes back for the melody, keeps things rhythmic and bluesy to the end. So I think with Murray, you get not only jazz, but you get a lot of other like R&B, gospel, all kinds of black music influences into his style, and that reflects in the feels that are chosen for the tunes. This is not swing jazz.
It's like a pop tune, really,
yeah,
or
pop tunes
with a rock kind of vibe to it. Yeah.
And the last one, am gon' get some. That's AMGONEGETSOME. Am gon' get some. This one is really cool. Another real kind of R&B thing. It's got a scooping bluesy sax lick with a low honk that's in that line that forms the focus of the melody for this tune. This one, surprisingly, has a swing feel in contrast to most of the straight and rocky beats of the previous tunes. Jones walks the bass in a swing style. Drake's got the riding cymbal going for that swing feeling too. Under Murray's explorations, they go into his solo. Jones here gets a more phrased type of bass solo. It's sort of set into little stanzas where he takes breaks between them. Drake also gets a drum solo in this one before Murray returns with that scooping riff lick and a short reprise of the melody to end it. So if you like your sax with a little more adventure and freestyle, this will be a good one for you. Murray's constantly inventive, exploring different regions, but the bass and drums keep things tight as far as structure goes, and the grooves in here are very rock R&B influenced. Murray's an inspired player, as I said, but everything locks together in the way these tunes fit together. There's a nice variety of feels and original melodies. They all seem sort of familiar in a way, even though this is all his original work here. So yeah, a lot of variety. Everyone wants to have a varied sax life, and you're going to get it in this program. Different styles, different players. We've got everything from alto, tenor, with different tones, bass clarinet, soprano sax, flute. What more could you want?
I really dug the ideas and sounds on the album. All the instruments brought out rarely heard sounds from their instruments, which I thought was really cool. These and the grooves were all interesting and enjoyable. And especially for me, the bass playing, the saxophone playing was interesting throughout, but the bass playing too was, he was sort of the other soloist, I guess.
Yeah, very interesting.
And he gets this rich sound, especially in the low end, some cool grooves. I really enjoyed listening to him a lot. When I was listening to this, I was thinking it was just too much hearing a saxophone alone with bass and drums for an entire album. I really liked it, but I was like, I don't know if I'll listen to this too often. But then hearing you talking about it now is making me kind of want to hear it again. Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe I will go for it. I don't know. But it was certainly enjoyable. I liked it a lot. I just thought it was like too much of the trio there. The sax trio is kind of an odd thing for me.
Yeah, I feel like it's probably the format that makes him feel most free.
Maybe that's it.
If you got a piano or a chord.
The whole idea of freedom, of course, inspires me. And jazz, jazz being the American music, it's like a free kind of music, right. So it's really, perfect for us, really.
A piano or a guitar, he's going to play like some 6 chord or 9 chord, and then suddenly you're going to be worried.
You. He's limiting what I can play.
This is not going to fit over that. You just got one bass note, or some of the intervals that he plays. You sort of, a lot more possibilities. And I think Murray's the kind of player who, you never know what direction he's going to go next, and he will resolve it and bring it back into. Kind of a complete statement. But if he doesn't have to worry about what another kind of voice is going to constrain that with, he sort of shines in his explorations. So, I thought it was pretty cool and groovy. and somebody with a different concept. So, yeah, lots of contrast in all the saxes here, and I hope you all enjoy.
Lots of good sax.
Yeah, I got a huge sax list, and the only thing I get more of than great sax is piano. And so, since you said we should do piano next week, the piano list is huge. We're going to do piano next week
because I've got some piano coming too. I've got a long piano list as well.
Yeah, the piano list is huge. So we'll just break out. Of course, there's one that I've been really wanting to get out since it's just come out. And that's the new Dave Kikoski Opus 5 recording. But I've got a couple other nice ones to throw in with that.
And I've got a recording you'll absolutely want to hear is Stephen Osborne's recent Rachmaninoff recording. Because I know you like him, and I know you liked his earlier Rachmaninoff recordings. So
absolutely,
I'm going to do that
sounds
one.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that's going to be good.
All right,
and some other surprises too.
Yeah. So we look forward to some keyboard delights next week.
Yeah.
And then eventually we'll get to a trumpet. I've got a lot of large ensemble recordings too, so maybe we could get an orchestral and big band kind of thing coming up.
I'm going to put this out there. I got a trumpet concerto CD that I'm waiting for, from a certain company that I order from. And they haven't yet. I ordered it May 11th because another CD in the list they haven't arrived yet, so I'm still waiting for this trumpet. So I keep delaying the trumpet episodes. I want to get that one in it, because otherwise I won't have any trumpet works, but it won't matter. Well, if it comes down to it, I'll listen to it on Deezer, but I wanted to have this one.
All right. We'll have trumpet coming soon, too.
We'll have it soon.
A lot of other possibilities, but next week will be piano for sure, so stay tuned. That will be episode 66. This has been episode 65 of Adult Music, the podcast with music for the mature mind. Please, again, remember you can check out all these links to the music here on Deezer, Apple Music, or Spotify if you like, but you can get everything in one place on Deezer, and that's the only place where we put the full playlist up early. So I'll have next week's piano recordings up tomorrow at some time on Deezer if you want to listen to them.
Except for the Osborne Rachmaninoff, which is on Hyperion.
Hyperion, yeah. So
they're doing it to us again.
No streaming for Hyperion, yes. Well, anyway, you get 5 of 6, and you can check out the Hyperion samples later in the week and decide if it's worth your.
Or you can just buy the album now and
buy it ahead of time.
Trust it's going to be good. I'm sure it is, because I love Stephen Osborne's playing. Yeah.
Anyway, please do like and subscribe on whatever platform you're on. Check out our Facebook page for additional clips. You want to see that Doug Webb clip for sure.
That was great.
You leave a comment if you like over there. If you want to contact us directly, as we said, please shoot us an email at adultmusicpodcast, all one word, at gmail.com.
We'd love to hear from you. Please do write.
Do write to us.
I'm sorry, say the address again.
adultmusicpodcast at gmail.com.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, check that out. We'd like to hear from you. And finally, before we sign off, thanks as always to Fast Signs, Staten Island, for our glowing neon logo, which got all those new Samsung listeners just to click on, if only once.
If only once. We hope to keep you all, but we'll see.
Keep some of them on. Yeah. So,
I think we turned him on to Knob Creek bourbon now. He's going to the liquor store now. Maybe it's because he's listening to us too much.
Yeah, he's listening to us too much. A bad influence. But I noticed that. I had the same problem last time I was in New York. I couldn't find the single barrel reserve.
That's the one we drink here on the.
So it might be only sold in Japan, which happens with a lot of whiskeys. They're marketed, specifically for different regions in different variations. So,
Japan's a funny. That would be worth doing a podcast on. Really, get another podcast.
I could do an all just drinking podcast.
Booze sold in Japan, because it's different than the rest of the world. They gotta get special things here from American makers. How does that happen?
I don't know, but if there's anything else other than music that I've spent a lot of my life on, it's been booze. So we could do a booze podcast too, for sure.
I couldn't do a booze. I'm not a specialist by any means. So, I don't know.
Well, yeah.
I do like a good bourbon or cognac brandy when I have one, though. I haven't drank any cognac lately. See, it's all gotten too expensive. I can't.
Yeah.
So I went down to the bourbon now.
Yeah, it's all getting expensive.
Which isn't too expensive. So I drink, the Knob Creek it's pricey for bourbon, but it's not.
Yeah.
Anything from a grape
outrageous.
can go into the thousands of dollars,
Yeah. But corn.
So,
how much you going to get for corn? Come on.
You're not going to get much for corn.
No. All right.
It's in everything.
Thanks for sticking with us to the end. And we'll see you again for episode 66 next week.